NPR comes from your part-time controller. Your part-time controller is hiring full and part-time accountants to assist nonprofits while working from home and at client offices. More at yourparttimecontroller.com/employment. And the Lemelson Foundation.
I'm Henry Santoro. Jim and Marjorie are at the public library today.
Eastern Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library.
And we're also streaming, Marjorie, as you were about to say, on youtube.com/GBH News.
Forgot that, Jim.
And by the way, you were also going to say hell of a show today, were you not?
Unbelievable show today.
I mean, not only, first of all, we're here.
We're here. That's
we're here.
Incredible.
David Gergen, Counselor to Four Presidents, has a great new book, Hearts Touched with Fire, How Great Leaders Are Made. John Rosenthal from Stop Handgun Violence. Corby Kummer, our food guy. The DA, Red Shaydez, fabulous hip-hop artist in town.
Preview. She's awesome.
Is going to perform. And by the way, before we even start, we welcome you and we urge you to come down sometime in this beautiful day, the next 3 hours. We also want to recognize one of the finest people in Boston who is joining us today, legendary WBZ reporter and poet Carl Stevens. We love you, Carl. One of the best ever.
May I just say something really quickly? I said this to Carl, but I want to say it again. You know, I was a reporter for a long time. Carl's been a reporter for a long time. You know, reporters are very competitive. You get the interview with the victim's husband. You don't want to tell anybody about it. Carl Stevens is the only reporter in Boston who would ever say, "Hey, there's a guy over there you want to talk to, Marjorie. Go over." He helped me out many times.
He's just going to get suspended for that, by the way. So last night, obviously, the House Select Committee began their series of hearings on the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. Committee member Jamie Raskin said in advance the revelations in the hearings will blow the roof off the House. Have they so far? The focus, as I hope you know from watching, was on President Trump, his continued false claims about the 2020 election, and how the insurrectionists took their marching orders directly from Trump. Here's video testimony played during the hearings last night of former Attorney General for Trump, William Barr, saying he told the president he did not agree that the election was stolen.
And I've been through sort of the give and take of those discussions, and in that context I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And you know, I didn't want to be a part of it.
You know, still thousands of Trump followers were a part of it, storming the Capitol, chanting "Hang Mike Pence," as shown in a video presentation by the committee. And by the way, Liz Cheney, who was terrific last night, one of the two Republicans, said the committee had documentation, which they'll provide later, that after that "Hang Mike Pence" chanting by the crowd, the President of the United States was suggesting that maybe they had the right idea. We're opening the show today, letting you weigh in. Did you watch it? We sure as hell hope you did. Was the roof blown off the House? Was the first night effective in making the case to America? The January 6th and Trump's continuing efforts are a direct threat to democracy. Give us a call or text us, 877-301-8970, or you can tweet us at BOS Public Radio. So what's your review, critique the morning after, Marjorie Egan?
Well, you know, as a person that does this for a living, I would say that Liz Cheney made a very compelling case that what Trump tried to do is replace people in the Department of Justice and replace the Attorney General and spend all his millions in many of his millions in campaign funds to spread lies about the election being stolen. He knew, because everybody around him told him the election was not stolen, that there was no fraud that was significant whatsoever. She made a very compelling case that the president committed crimes and violated the Constitution. But the Democrats oversold. I mean, once again, you tuned in at 8 o'clock last night. You know, Benny Thompson's a great guy. He's from Mississippi. He's got a great life story. He talked about how white supremacy reminding him of the KKK when he was a kid. It shouldn't have started with 15 minutes of Benny Thompson talking. I think they lost a lot of audience. The first thing they showed shouldn't have been like almost a home movie like of Bill Barr up on the screen. We had this idea that this was going to be a media event. And I think they really failed on that front. If you're a professional person, you do this for a living, or you're really a partisan, you looked at it and you said, we had a criminal president trying to overthrow the election and take away people's votes. If you're a casual viewer, I think you went back to what you might have wanted to watch
I
otherwise.
think it was more effective than you did. You know, by the way, we mentioned we played the bar sound. Ivanka Trump, they played it on the national news. I want to play it again. She was asked about what Barr had to say. The first voice you'll hear was the prosecutor asking her a question, and then Ivanka, again, getting the reaction to what the Attorney General had to say, that the election was not stolen. Here it is.
How did that affect your perspective about the election when Attorney General Barr made that statement?
It affected my perspective. I respect Attorney General Barr. So I accepted what he was saying.
And in a beautiful Trumpian fashion, the former President of the United States trashed his daughter and said, literally this morning, and said, and this is not a word I usually use on or off the radio, said that Bill Barr sucked. That's what Donald Trump had to say on Truth Social this morning. 877-301-8970. Marjorie doesn't believe the presentation was terribly effective last night, that they did not blow the roof off the House. I thought it was, frankly, quite powerful and effective. And at some point, we're going to play some sound from this Capitol cop police officer who I thought was just chillingly powerful in her presentation about what she and her fellow officers trying to protect both the Capitol and democracy were doing. 877-301-8097. You had great coverage of this morning. I want to give a shout out. The Boston Herald, your former employer, their coverage on their front page. Oh, no, wait a second. It's 100% about the Celtics. They didn't have any room to mention a hearing about an assault on our democracy and an attempt to overturn a presidential election. Are they serious?
Well, let me tell you, Jim, I quit the Boston Herald, and
My
a big reason
God.
why I quit is because the Herald decided a good long time ago that they weren't going to be presenting anything but the Trump view of the world, and I think that a lot of us quit at that time.
Well, you know, and I also want to say, because Marjorie doesn't like it when I say this, I am not troubled by the fact at all that even though Marjorie worked at the Herald for 30 years, after she stepped down on a Friday while her boss knew we were on the air, called her voicemail to say they were ending her health care, even though all three of her children were on the health care. But obviously that had no impact on me. 877-301-8970. Can I play one more clip before we start taking calls?
Yep.
I thought the most chilling line of the night, which I'm sure changed nobody's mind, was Liz Cheney talking about her fellow Republicans. Here is Congresswoman Cheney, who, as I'm sure you all know, is the vice chair of this select January 6th committee.
I say this to my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain.
You know, that gives me chills. Your dishonor will remain. And you know what? Can I get one more thing on my system before we start engaging people
Certainly,
here?
Jim.
Kevin McCarthy, who we know lied about what he said in terms of Donald Trump's behavior on January 6th. And then when the two New York Times guys released it, the guys who just came out with their book a couple of weeks ago, he continued to say he never said it, even though we had it recorded. You know what he had the nerve to say last night? He said, I'm paraphrasing, where are the primetime televised hearings on inflation? Okay, fine. And get this one, on feeding the children.
That's right.
Later in the show, we're going to talk about the fact that the Republicans refused to extend a school lunch program that feeds an additional 10 million poor kids in this country. And he wants to know where the primetime hearings are on feeding the children.
I mean, the thing about Liz Cheney is she is behind double digits out there in Wyoming because she's got a Trumpster that's running against her in the primary. But she is a woman of character. I disagree with almost everything in her politics. I mean, she's terrible on climate, awful. But she's a woman of character, and she's going to go down, probably lose her job. But she's unique, practically, in the Republican Party.
Unique
today.
for taking a totally mainstream position that any responsible politician of either party in this country should be taking.
She talked about Kevin McCarthy that day being scared.
Yeah, I love
how
that.
He was
I love
calling,
that.
scared was the word she used. And she also talked about, and this just, that Mark Meadows, who's chief of staff of President Trump, that they all were all urging, that day, everybody around him, including his daughter, was urging him to do something to stop this attack. And what happened is Pence, that the president thought deserved to be hung. He actually said that that when his reporters were saying hang Mike Pence, that he said that maybe Mike deserved to be hung. That's a paraphrase, but Mike deserved it is what he said. That Pence was the one, according to General Milley, who was also, his testimony was shown last night, who said we got to get the National Guard, we got to get the military active, we got to put this insurrection down. Mark Meadows calls in Milley and says, now we have to set out the narrative that it was the president that was doing this, not the vice president. We have to change the narrative. And Milley said that was a red flag, and I ignored it.
You know, I keep saying one more thing, and then you egg me on. This really is the one more thing. We're going to play a little sound in a couple of minutes from the Capitol Officer Edwards, who I thought was just terrific and powerful last night. So you listen to her talking about she's knocked unconscious, and when she wakes up, she goes back to work, slipping in her fellow officer's blood while she's trying to do her job. And once again, did you see what Trump's initial tweet after that testimony was? That January 6th, and this is a quote, was the greatest movement in the history of our country. 877-301-8970. Chris in Hyde Park, you were first on Boston Public Radio. Thank you much for calling. Hi.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
Jim, Marjorie, love you guys. You are the sugar that helps the medicine go down.
Whoa.
So,
obviously not talking about me, but go ahead.
You're right, Jim. So I wanted to say I watched the whole thing in entirety last night. And, so far the roof has not been blown off the house for me. But I will say it was good to see the entire thing laid out in one full story,
I agree
like
with
a
that.
Frontline episode or something, so it helped kind of energize everything. And I would also say that, the most compelling testimony came out of Bill Barr because he's such a deep insider, goes so far back, and for him, who is the likes of him, who have used Donald Trump as a useful idiot to push an agenda that is so draconian, and for him to deny, it could have been so easy for him to take Trump's lead and call the elections bogus, and we'd be in a completely different spot today. And he didn't do that. And lastly, I will just say that my concern about this whole thing is the potential reformation of the characters of Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner somehow coming off as some kind of good people for siding with law and order on this. And I just hope that doesn't happen because a lot of reasons.
Well, I can tell you the only two people who hope it doesn't happen more than you are looking at each other, Marjorie and me, right now. Chris, thank you very much for the call. I'm not even going to play the sound, speaking of Kushner and Ivanka Trump, of Kushner describing Trump's general counsel, who was thinking of resigning for obvious reasons, as what did he call him, a whiner last night?
He said that, he was whining. Cipollini was whining by talking about how he wanted to resign. I also
saw another great moment.
What?
How about when they put that letter from Lincoln up
on
the screen in the handwriting of President Lincoln saying he thought he was going to lose the election. He thought losing the election was going to be really bad for this country, but that the peaceful transition of power was so important that he, of course, would do it. I mean, it really is.
But what I thought was the most important thing. The previous caller said the roof wasn't blown off for him, but how Trump orchestrated everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
well, that's their goal.
And and you hope that Merrick Garland is going to do something here instead of sitting around hemming and hawing. I mean, what a disappointment he's been so far. I mean, he's got to do something here. And when he talked about how all these people were resigning, threatening to resign that day, many of them did resign. All the people around him that were appalled. People in the Justice Department. Remember that the senior leadership of the DOJ wanted to resign when they thought that he was going to try to actually meddle in the election. I mean,
but you have to be. Can I tell you? You have to be careful about that. Like the first caller who was saying, Barr could have continued being a sycophant. The vast majority of these people resigned. Did not resign because all of a sudden they had an epiphany that they were working for someone who was not a man of principle. They worked for Trump. They knew who Trump was. It was a CYA kind of thing at the end
Well,
because they want to be able to get a job down the line.
I think that when you realize that your boss is breaking the law and that maybe you think that maybe breaking the law along with him is the final straw. I'm not saying these are people whose politics I agree with. I'm just saying that this was so bad.
Why didn't they all resign the day that they heard the tape of him calling Raffensperger, the Secretary of State in Georgia, saying, you just got to find me 11,700 votes? If they were all so principled, why weren't they gone by dinner time on that day?
I'm not defending these people. Don't yell at me. Why don't you call them up and ask them?
Lee and Redding, you're next on Boston Public Radio with Marjorie Egan and me, Jim Browdy. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Sure.
It's calling to say that I can't wait for the Republicans to take over the House and put all these people in jail because that was a sham last night.
Elaborate.
Which people should we put in
Lee.
jail?
Give me some details. What was a sham?
People that put in jail, Nancy Pelosi,
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer for, inciting the attempted assassination of Kavanaugh.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you one more thing. I assume you'd agree with the president that what happened on January 6th was the greatest movement in American history. Would you agree?
Not at all. It was a riot. It shouldn't have happened. But you guys are making it sound like it was the crime of the century.
Lee, I'm just curious. Where's your information that Nancy Pelosi was behind the attempted assassination of Justice Kavanaugh?
No, Chuck Schumer.
Chuck Schumer. How did Chuck Schumer? What was his association with the shooter?
He actually said you're going to reap the whirlwind when you reverse Roe v. Wade.
And so you hold him responsible for causing a man to come down there and call 911.
Well, you're holding Trump responsible for what other people.
Well, there's one difference. The reason we're holding Trump responsible is because he did it.
There were
Lee,
actions.
thank you for the call. 877-301-8970. Other people who think that Chuck Schumer is responsible for this, give us a buzz.
Did you go back and forth, by the way, at all to Fox last night?
No.
These are kind of the things they were talking about. That, Nancy, why didn't Nancy Pelosi call out the National Guard? Nancy Pelosi can't call out the National Guard, by the way. They were urging President Trump to call out the National Guard.
By the way, I'm not even sure Mike Pence could call out the National Guard. He did. But I'm not sure he has the power when the president is still in a position and is not temporarily stepped down pursuant to the... By the way, I'm not criticizing him.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff took the instructions from Mike Pence very seriously. Margie from Lexington.
Hi there, Margie. How are you?
Hi. I'm calling because I agree with everything that you guys have said. I think that last night was great. I think that they should somehow be able to show it in public schools, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I have a slightly different take.
Sure.
That in this Sunday's Boston Globe, the back page is always a section called Connections, where people can write in about things that have happened to them. And last week was about a man who in 2015 sat in front of Rudy Giuliani at a Yankees game, a Yankees Red Sox
I read this. I saw, yeah.
And it just shows that in 2015, 3 years or 2 years before Trump hired him to be a special White House advisor, he was nuts. He was talking to himself.
Wow.
Were you talking about the president or Rudy Giuliani?
Giuliani, that's the kind of judgment that...
Well, I mean, look at the whole cast of characters. Jared Kushner was his key advisor. What exactly was the experience in the young man to be a chief advisor to a president of the United States? I think you just go down the line. And by the way, and thank you, Margie, for the call. There were a lot of principled people. We had one on the show, the former Secretary of Defense a couple of weeks ago, Esper. And I respectfully disagree with him, and I know you do too. A lot of these people should have resigned and gone public and told the public what they saw, in my opinion at least, rather than suggesting that they were staying to protect us from the worst of Donald Trump.
I've sort of changed my mind about that, that everybody should have resigned or lots of them should have resigned, because the problem is it wouldn't have mattered. And I think Esper's right. He would have been replaced by total yes men. And in that case, we would have been left with an infiltration of the Department of Justice, the Homeland Security, all these people lying. And I think that would have been the problem. If you have like Mark Meadows types or Jim Jordan types doing the president's bidding, we might have had a much different situation.
Yeah, I hear you. 877-301-8970 is our phone number.
Listen to this. This is from a texter. It says, when the officer described the scene at the Capitol as carnage, I immediately flashed back to Trump's inaugural address, where he decried so-called American carnage. Funny how things turn around.
By the way, our colleagues have said, since we're streaming on YouTube, that I should hold up the front page of the Herald, which dealt in depth, of course, with the hearing on the riots last night. Golden State Warriors gripe about Hub crowd. So much for that. 877-301-8970.
Okay, we're getting your reaction to night one of the January 6 hearings. Did you watch? Were you convinced? Were you not convinced? Were you complaining like I was that Benny Thompson shouldn't have talked for 15 minutes when the whole thing started? We're going to take a quick break. When we get back, more of your calls. Stick around. This is 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio.
Next time on The World, new calls for action on gun control. It's been an uphill battle in the U.S. In the UK, that battle was won a quarter century ago.
We had a very clear goal. We wanted a ban on the civilian ownership and use of handguns.
How a unified gun control movement succeeded in banning handguns in Britain. It's on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Mass Audubon, where you can get outdoors and experience wildlife sanctuaries across the state, from the Cape to the Berkshires. You can join today. The adventure starts at massaudubon.org. And Babson College. You can make your dreams a priority with their part-time MBA. Applications due by June 24th for scholarship consideration for fall 2022. babson.edu/part-time.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. We are live at the Boston Public Library. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. One of the texters said the best line from Stephen Colbert, and the texter goes on to say, which I'm sure you will not use last night, was Ivanka finally screwed her father. In any case, that was Stephen Colbert. That was not me. And another texter says what you're saying, Jim, about Bill Barr doing an save his behind kind of thing is can be said about Liz Cheney. I would totally disagree. Liz Cheney's career, at least as a congressperson, is probably over in Wyoming because she did the principal thing. Bill Barr's effort was to salvage his tattered reputation. So I don't see the parallel at all. By the way, we've mentioned Caroline Edwards, who was the Capitol police officer, who was talking about the moment she realized the full scope of the attack on the Capitol. The scene she described last night is a moment after she'd been knocked unconscious, yet had returned to the line of duty.
What I saw was just a war scene. Officers on the ground, they were bleeding, they were throwing up, they were, they had, I saw friends with blood all over their faces. I was slipping in people's blood. I was catching people as they fell. It was carnage. It was chaos. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that as a police officer, as a law enforcement officer, I would find myself in the middle of a battle.
She was terrific. And let me just get this out of my system one more time.
She was also a knockout, not to be superficial.
I'm shocked that you reached that conclusion.
It was good, though. You want to have knockouts on TV.
She describes the carnage among the cops. Donald Trump then makes a statement last night. January 6th was the greatest movement in U.S. history. And I'll say what I said to you yesterday. Is anybody going to change their mind? So an average person who's a Trump fan who thinks this is a hoax watches this Capitol officer talk about what happened to her and her colleagues. Brian Sicknick, who, as I think people know, died, was it the next day or a couple of days later? Here's the former president says what you just saw. He didn't say those words. Greatest movement in U.S. history. And they still think he's their guy. Can you explain that?
Well, we just had Lee call a little
Well, that
while
was
ago,
one troll. I mean, it's one guy.
Well, I think, somebody is emailing in that said just a couple of minutes ago that Lee reminded him of when Jerry Williams would get these calls. Remember that Jerry Williams was a great talk show host on BZ and RKO and elsewhere? They're out there in great numbers.
But I'm not saying that everybody changes their mind. There are some decent people.
I think people that are Trump people didn't watch it.
Maybe you're right. Al on the road, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you much for your call. Hi.
Hey, guys. I watched some of it last night, and unfortunately, I don't think that this is going to change one person's mind.
No, I'm afraid you're right.
And why do you think that, Al?
I've been calling you guys, I've been calling you for years, but I've been calling you about this subject for at least 6 years. And every single time we're like, this is it. You can't do that. You can't say that. This is it. This is the end.
You're right.
The man literally led a revolution against his own government.
You're so right.
He said, this is what I did. He said, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened in America, a revolution against our own government. And his supporters, with American flags and thin blue line stickers, don't care one iota. They didn't listen to that woman last night talk about slipping in her
the blood of her colleagues.
Right. And thin blue line, they don't care. It's Trump or nothing, no matter what. And it's disgusting, and it scares the hell out of me for the future of my kids.
Me too.
Al, I so am with you. I mean, when you look back in the campaign, I remember I made a fool of myself over and over again and said, Donald Trump, the candidate, he went after the Gold Star parents who lost their son.
Teaser con.
That's it. He's done. Nothing. Then he goes after John McCain, saying he likes people who don't get caught. He basically went after the military, Al, a military hero, a guy who spent, 5 years in prison by the North Vietnamese. I thought, that's it, he's done. Then he says he gets out and he likes to grab women by the you-know-what. and I thought, oh, my God. Now it's 24. I think at the time we were about a dozen women who said he had grabbed them by the you-know-what or worse to that effect. Didn't make a difference. It's like there's a cult, right? It's a cult.
You know what the only hope, and Al, that was an excellent call, unfortunately. But you know this is a really thin read because, as you know, we're going to talk to David Gergen, talk about great days to have David here. When you say to yourself, which you and I both do, that democracy is hanging by a thread, the only thing I can think of that may cause that thread not to break is maybe this is all just Trump related. Maybe it doesn't translate to a DeSantis or an Abbott as president, Texas and Florida governors. Maybe it's all the cult of Donald Trump himself, who is a master showman, performer,
I don't think so.
flim-flam artist. You think it goes beyond, even if there's no Trump?
I think Ron DeSantis is even scarier because he's a very smart guy.
He's smarter, yeah,
He's
right.
not
That's a good
deranged like former President Trump is, or mentally ill like I think former President Trump is, or certainly, what's the word for the narcissistic pathology? There's a word for that, right?
You know who was the first person in America, as far as I know, to write an essay about the narcissistic personality of candidate Donald Trump?
Who?
Our guest at noon, David Gergen, on
Really?
CNN.com. I remember reading it 7 or 8 years ago. It was incredible. Where do you want to go next?
Let's go to Linda in Sandwich. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Linda.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I just wanted to say that among the other pieces of evidence presented last night, one of the most salient points I found was that the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers had been meeting together prior to the 6th
Really
of
glad
January,
you brought that up.
coordinated with each other before the rally and left before the rally started to reconnoiter in front of the Capitol, possibly to scope out their resistance.
That's a good point.
That was
Glad
a great
you brought
point,
it up.
Linda. The documentary filmmaker, we haven't mentioned him, Quested, I think his name is.
Quested, I think, yeah.
Yeah, he had that great footage of them meeting in the garage, in the dark in the garage, just like in Watergate when Deep Throat met with Bob Woodward in the garage. He showed all that. And the footage last night, we should mention, was a lot of that was from that documentary that the Quested guy was doing. So a lot of last night was indeed new. It had a familiarity about it because it was like a major riot, but it was from this documentary. Lori in the car, thank you for calling.
Hello, Lori.
Hello. A couple points. The first one is I thought that Cheney laid out her argument in such a seasoned, professional way, like a prosecutor or a seasoned defense attorney.
Mm-hmm.
But the evidence is so compelling. And, you know, after the Watergate hearings, it got Nixon to resign. Unfortunately, we don't have Trump as president right now. What is the outcome Is it to get Merrick Garland to bring a case against Trump? He clearly violated the law. So what is a legal outcome that can come from this?
Well, legal outcome is there can be a
Indicts the
referral
president.
from the select committee urging the indictment. Number one, Merrick Garland doesn't need a referral to investigate and indict, but two, that could happen. But I don't know who I'm quoting from the other day. I did this yesterday or the day before, and maybe Larry Tribe, I'm not sure. But a smart lawyer said, don't hold your hopes up in terms of an indictment of Donald Trump, despite the overwhelming evidence. Merrick Garland wouldn't even indict two members of the Trump administration last week for contempt of Congress who refused
indict the FBI guys
in the Nassar
whose
case. You're
inaction
right.
caused 70 more young women to be sexually molested by Dr. Larry Nassar. He wouldn't even indict them. And even worse, the FBI guy was looking to get a job with the
Olympic
U.S.
Committee.
Gymnastics, whatever it was. But I do think.
Thank you for your call, by the way.
The part to me that was so telling was last night when Cheney talked about how he was telling all these top DOJ people, Department of Justice people, just say the election was corrupt. Leave the rest to me. This was his line. Just tell them that. So they can testify in a court of law about basically sedition.
Can I respond to this is not an original thought, so why are you saying it, Jim? I have no idea, but I'm going to say it anyway. In response to the prior caller, when she was comparing Watergate, let me tell you two differences from my perspective, and you should read the brilliant piece when Woodward and Bernstein reunite in the Washington Post a couple of days ago to compare the Nixon crimes and the Trump crimes. Number one, what's dramatically different is Nixon pretended till the end that he hadn't committed crimes.
Right.
Donald Trump is admitted virtually every day on Twitter or in person he did. The second thing is, and I know this is creation of a fiction, if we didn't know anything that was said last night, Marjorie, in the first hour by Benny Thompson and Liz Cheney, and the first time we heard any of that information was there, as opposed to it just more of what we've been hearing for 5 years about Donald Trump, what do you think the reaction of the American people would be then? If it was all new, it wasn't sort of like there's some more nuance added, some more video you've never seen before, some testimony that you didn't know about. The problem is people went into this knowing about the crimes and misdemeanors of Donald Trump, and it's really hard to elevate that bar when you enter with that set of information, don't you think?
I think it's like the old, story about the frog
in the water. Hot water, yeah.
If you get in the frog gets in the water when the water's lukewarm and suddenly gets boiled to death, what happens? You dump them in the boiling water and the frog jumps out.
Was it Glenn Close put the dead frog in Michael Douglas? What did she do in that? A rabbit. It was a dead rabbit.
She killed the family rabbit.
And what'd she do? Put it in a pot of boiling water?
She boiled it to death, and the poor little kid takes the top off.
And the rabbit's in the pot?
The rabbit is in the pot.
That's unsettling, screaming. Would you not say?
Yeah, that was an unsettling movie. That's right.
What was that called?
Oh, God.
Fatal Attraction. John Parker, thank God
Parker,
for you. What would we do without John? We have time for one more call. Quick one. Steve in Watertown, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Steve.
Hey, how you guys doing? I was the last caller yesterday, too. Listen, I want to say that Benny Thompson's opening statements were totally appropriate for the reason of providing a broader perspective to younger voters in particular, because a huge portion of Trump's followers are the white supremacists, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys.
Yeah.
So I appreciated Benny Thompson's opening statement.
I'm glad to hear. I'm really thrilled to hear you say that, Steve. Thanks.
I think he could have said it in. Because that was one of his first lines, how he lived through this in his small town Mississippi town.
521 people. Yeah,
talked about how it
great.
reminded him of the KKK and the white supremacy stuff. But that was like the first minute of his talk, Steve. I just thought we didn't need 15 minutes. You know what I mean?
I'm with you, Steve. Steve, thanks for ending on a positive note, because we never end on a positive note about anything.
Okay.
But we are today. Thank you, Steve, for your call.
Okay, coming up, we're going to be joined here live at the Boston Public Library by the Suffolk County District Attorney Kevin Hayden. He is up next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
conventions are over. Now state Democrats and Republicans are looking ahead to the primaries. I'm Adam Riley. Tonight on Talking Politics, we'll size up where both parties stand in the race for governor and other statewide contests. Plus, Governor Baker's been pushing legislation he says would protect survivors of domestic violence, but the legislature still hasn't acted. We'll dig into why. Join us for Talking Politics tonight at 7 on GBH2 and online at gbhnews.org.
Support for our programs comes from you and the Worcester Art Museum, presenting Jewels of the Nile, where you can experience ancient Egypt in brilliant color through 300 pieces of jewelry displayed for the first time. Opening June 18th. More at worcesterart.org. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. She is Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. By the way, for those who want to hear more about the hearings last night and what's likely to come ahead, in about 20 minutes, we're going to be joined by the great David Gergen, whose latest terrific book is Hearts Touched with Fire, How Great Leaders Are Made. We're going to talk about the book and his take on last night. But first, we're joined by Suffolk County DA Kevin Hayden. District Attorney, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Marjorie, Jim, good to see you. Thank you.
You know, District Attorney, I was going to start with the restorative justice thing, but it just made me think two things. You said you didn't watch the hearings last night just because you were busy, or you're not interested, or why didn't you watch?
Busy doing the work of being a Suffolk County DA. I didn't know. I'll absorb all that over the weekend.
Okay. Okay. The second thing I was going to ask you, we're going to talk a little bit later with John Rosenthal, handgun violence. He's been a big gun law reform guy. I just wondered, we are facing a Supreme Court decision which could mean that people don't need to get a reason for carrying a weapon openly that could affect Massachusetts. And I just wonder, as the DA, how important has it been that chiefs of police in different towns have some discretion in who winds up getting a license to carry openly? I mean, is that a big deal, or is that going to matter that much from what you've seen in your career with guns and violence?
I don't know if it will, insofar as, at least in my experience in the job I do, I don't think that our concern is with people who are legally carrying firearms. Mm-hmm. Our concern with firearms and the extent to which they can drive cycles of violence and shootings and murders and the like comes from illegal possession on the streets.
See, I'm just worried about people now being able to walk into CVS with a gun or come to the kids' soccer game with a gun.
How about Eric Adams? What the mayor of New York City said, riding on the number 4 train, everybody's going to be packing a weapon.
Yeah, that's a legitimate concern, absolutely. And it's something that I think we need to pay careful attention to. Here in Massachusetts, would I be concerned about that? Yes.
Okay, then let's get back to the one thing I was going to start with. What's going on with this restorative justice program that you're doing?
Sure. So we've launched this sort of formally as a pilot in Charlestown, in Chelsea, and in Roxbury. And when I say launch, we haven't officially launched it yet. We're in the process of rolling it out. We're still working with the courts and with the partners to make sure we're all on the same page. But we have dedicated ourselves to creating a formal program which we believe will ultimately sweep through all of our district courts, where we'll look at the restorative justice model for lower level offenses as a way to heal our communities, to address crimes at the lower level that impact our community, and to bring those who are committing some of these crimes together with community, together with the people that they're affecting, and try to address it in a holistic way and hopefully prevent it from happening in the future that way.
Just to understand the mechanics, obviously everybody would need to buy in voluntarily. Is that not correct?
Restorative justice always requires a complete buy-in by everybody, in my estimation, whether you're talking about healing circles for more violent crime or whether you're talking about the program that we've just started.
As opposed to an affirmative program like that coming out of you, I want to talk about a case that's ended up on your lap. Joseph Jabir Pope was on television with me in April, and if I get any of these facts slightly wrong, please interrupt me because I want to get this right. 37 years in jail under a felony murder statute, meaning he didn't do the killing, but he was there, and under the law at the time, he's as guilty as the actual killer. The highest court in the state said, no, going forward, unless somebody who did not figuratively pull the trigger, because it might be a knife or something else, had, quote, an intent to kill when he or she was along for that ride, then no, they can't be found guilty of felony murder. The hope of Pope's lawyers was that this SJC would rule in his case retroactively. In fact, they said they didn't need to reach that issue because there were ethical violations by prosecutors in your office decades ago, obviously before you, by withholding exculpatory evidence. Here's a little sound just to get a feel for Mr. Pope when he was with me. I asked him about whether or not he expected to die in jail before ever getting the possibility of being freed. Here he is.
When I was being processed out, a caseworker asked me if I ever thought that this day would come. And my response to her was that I always fought for this day to come. I didn't have the luxury of giving up, because giving up would have simply meant to die in prison, and I wasn't prepared to do that. So I hoped and I prayed and I strived and I stayed focused on the possibility that this day would come.
Again, 37 years in jail. I don't think there's any dispute, correct me if I'm wrong, he did not do the killing. Are you going to retry this guy?
I can't make an announcement regarding that here today. We are going through a process of reviewing the decision, and we have notifications that we have to make to people involved in the case. And so I can't tell you at this time what we're doing because of that process. But we are looking at the case.
I know you can't tell me, but what it sounds like you're saying is you're not going to retry the guy. Just nod in my direction if I'm accurate. You know,
how about if I don't nod or shake my head?
You know, let's talk about this in the abstract. So it's sort of a philosophy of a prosecutor. 37 years in jail, at least from my research before I interviewed Mr. Pope and his lawyer, reformed his life, became a mentor for other prisoners. No question, he did not commit the crime. He was there. He did not commit the crime. Going forward, the SJC has said you shouldn't be found guilty of felony murder. Again, not retroactive, going forward.
Right.
In the abstract, is that not the perfect kind of person to decide you've proven you have a right to return to society and have a second chance?
Absolutely the right kind of person. So I would say, in addition to that, two other things. One, my concern is exactly, I think, where the SJC's concern was in this case, which was regards to ethical violations. That is
by your office, your predecessors' office.
By my office. That is our ultimate concern. We do not ever want to see that. We always want that not to happen, and when it does happen, we want to handle it appropriately, as I think has been done in this case. So that's of paramount importance.
Okay.
When it comes to, and you're right, he didn't do it. So when it comes to felony murder, and I think we talked about this a little bit last time, I think the answer to that has to be a legislative fix, because there's laws that are in place that are in the books, and
in terms of the retroactivity.
In terms of the retroactivity,
Yeah.
and I trust, hope, and remain to pray that the legislature will make those fixes. In addition to that, there's nothing that would prevent us on a case-by-case basis from looking at them from an integrity review board standpoint if they're brought to us.
And quickly, when are you making a decision formally in this case?
On the
Pope case.
Soon.
You know, just one last thing about this. I think most people know, you know, the idea of the felony murder law was two guys are at the CVS robbing the place. One of them shoots the clerk. The other one is just getting his aspirin or whatever the other person is doing. But they would both be convicted if the jury came back, right? They'd both be convicted of first-degree murder, even though, or they could be second-degree, I guess. But in any case, that was the idea. We're going to convict them both. And I know just from covering trials back in the 80s and 90s, lots of juries felt kind of weird about this whole thing.
Yeah.
It's over now. It's abolished, I think, in 2017. But what do you think about it as a prosecutor all those years? You know, one's the rapist and the stabber, one's collecting the jewelry in the other room.
So for me, it was always important to make sure that the people that were involved were culpable, right? And I think that that's part of Chief Justice Gantz's decision in terms of making it retroactive, not retroactive, at least in the initial decision, was concern of, well, I don't know what the Commonwealth might have done in terms of presenting its case differently had felony murder not been in place. And so I think that was the concern with regards to retroactivity. But I'm hopeful that in short order, these things will be taken care of.
We're talking to Kevin Hayden, who is the interim, as he says, the DA in Suffolk County. We talked to Ricardo Arroyo, city councilor, who is running against Kevin Hayden in the primary here. You at a recent event, one of our colleagues was there, talked about the possibility of reinstituting a so-called Safe Neighborhoods Initiative. And my recollection is your former boss, Ralph Martin, had such a thing when you were there. One, what is it? And two, are you about to reinitiate it?
We are absolutely going to try, and I think we will be successful in that respect. I don't know if it happens overnight, but Safe Neighborhood Initiative, in its general sense, is engaged in a level of community prosecution and community engagement that tackles and addresses intervention and prevention strategies to hopefully prevent crimes from happening in the first place. Most notably, low-level offenses and less serious offenses. Working collaboratively and closely with community groups, faith-based organizations, secular 501c3s, the city, street workers, everybody working collaboratively, takes time and effort, working collaboratively to address intervention and prevention strategies that can make a difference. It's an important part of a comprehensive approach for me, to criminal legal reform. Because when you focus on alternatives to prosecution and diversion, that's great, and there's a place for that. But intervention and prevention strategies and the types of things that we did in the Safe Neighborhood Initiative years ago can help prevent from even having to get to that point in the first place. So for me, it's an important diaspora, an important part of what needs to be added into robust and complete criminal legal reform.
You know, speaking of collaboration, to use your word, Kevin Hayden, Ricardo Arroyo, your opponent, was here a couple of weeks ago. We mentioned the fact that the Mayor Wu, endorsed him. Is it hard to work? I mean, I hope that the DA and the mayor work hand in hand when it's appropriate. Is it harder to work with Mayor Wu when you know she has decided that your opponent would be a better DA than she appears to think you'd be?
Not at all. Not for me. And we've discussed that. We have important work to do.
You and she have discussed it?
Yes. Absolutely.
How was that conversation?
Exactly as I'm characterizing it right now. We discussed the fact that we both know that we have important work to do for the citizens of Suffolk County, and that we need to work together and work collaboratively together to get the job done. So,
how aggravated are you about this? Her decision. I'm serious. I mean, I'm sure. How aggravated are you?
I'm not aggravated by her decision, and so I don't want to mischaracterize and refuel the quote that I did make, because it was meant entirely to focus on the difference in my experience and my qualifications to do this job as compared to a Ricardo Arroyo.
What's the difference?
25 years of experience doing working in our criminal legal system, from the DA's office to being a defense attorney. He touts his record of being a criminal defense attorney. I was a criminal defense attorney for longer than he was. I know what it's like to do that. I actually represented a young man in federal court on hand-to-hand drug transaction sales. Got a very good resolution for that man. Established a very good rapport with him, as I should as his defense attorney. Did more than just defend him in court, and counseled him as well about getting out of trouble, staying out of trouble, about not reoffending. Kept a relationship with that man for 3 years after we finished the case in court. So I know what that's like. I know what it's like to represent individuals who are caught up in our system, who sometimes are unjustly caught up in our system. So in addition to being a prosecutor, I've done that. I've also led a state agency before I led this
Sex Offender
at the
Registry.
Sex Offender Registry Board for 8 years. Compared that to his limited experience as a criminal defense attorney, and in my opinion, and I hope that the voters will agree, there's just simply no comparison.
So, D.A. Hayden, you led the Sex Offender Registry, as you just said. There was a sex offender that was in the Boston Police Department for many, many years, Patrick Rose, the top brass in the Boston Police Department. knew he had a very serious and likely sexual abuse incident back in 1995. He remained a cop for up to 20 years. Now he's doing 10 years in prison for sexually molesting multiple children. Mayor Wu has just now read more of the Rose Report, more of the less redaction, more facts, although apparently some of it is still redacted. But we still don't really know how he maintained his position, how he became president of the union. And it just does seem this excuse of redaction to protect the victim is kind of, I just don't buy it, basically. I mean, we just don't know. So is there any role for you in this, or what do you think about this? I mean, should people know who exactly allowed this person to maintain his role as a police officer with access to children for an additional 20 years?
So, first of all, as far as Mr. Rose is concerned, what we did was bring him to justice. What we did is charge him with the offenses that we could charge him for and hold him accountable for those. He went to trial, as everyone knows. He was convicted and received hefty sentences for those offenses. And that's always our primary focus. When it comes to redaction for protection of victims, and as a chair of the Sex Offender Registry Board for 8 years, with all due respect, I do buy it to a certain extent. So I think that's important. That having been said, I understand now that the file has been completely turned over with the exception of redaction for that specific purpose. I think that's great. I think that's good. I'm glad it's been done. That's something I've encouraged.
But I guess how does revealing who the people were that made these decisions have anything to do with the victim? You know, there's two different things. What the victim said happened is over here, and who decided that he should continue is over there.
Sure. And look, I don't know how much of the answers to those questions are in that file. I just don't. I know that that there is a certain level of redaction that has to occur in cases like this. I would do the same. Again, we were focused on charging and prosecuting and holding Mr. Rose accountable for the crimes that he committed that we knew could hold up in a court of law, and that's what we did.
Kevin Hayden, before you go, can I give you a little advice as a candidate? You failed miserably as a candidate today, because any candidate in Boston or Massachusetts right now figures out how to work in the Celtics, no matter what their answer is. So it doesn't matter what you're being asked about. Trust me on this. I'll give Mr. Arroyo the same advice. You have to work in Marcus Smart or something if you really want to go anywhere with your career.
I just don't want Marcus Smart to commit so many turnovers.
That's exactly what we're talking about. That was perfect.
Don't shoot as much and play defense.
Look, the crowd is wild now that you said that.
Don't try for those 3 pointers. Forget that. But don't you love the green hair?
Do your job. I love it, but he's got to play defense. That's his job.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't know why they go for all those 3 pointers when they should just go make the short shots.
I don't know if you know they won the game.
They did.
Yeah, I know that. But
they're going to win tonight, too.
I hope so.
Is he finally getting it or what?
He's finally getting it.
Kevin
That's
Hayden,
right.
it's really good to see you. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks so much for your time.
Take care.
Thank you very much. We've been speaking with Kevin Hayden. He's the DA of Suffolk County. And coming up, we're going to talk with 4-time presidential advisor David Gergen on the threats facing American leadership and his great new book on how America's younger generations can lead out of this mess. And what does it mean to be a leader, and how do you become a leader, and what do great leaders do? You're listening. Heaven knows we need that at this particular juncture. Yes, Jim?
Can I say one more thing since we brought up the mayor? Am I right, Jamie? June 28th? June 28th. Mayor Wu will join us here at the Boston Public Library so we can continue those conversations. And I'm sorry, Marjorie.
Okay, David Gergen up next. You're listening to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and Friday from the Boston Public Library.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and Ocean State Job Lot. partnering with customers to help animal welfare organizations throughout the Northeast. Learn more at oceanstatejoblot.com. That's oceanstatejoblot.com. Join GBH News political reporter Adam Riley for dynamic discussions on what's happening at the local ballot box. Don't miss Talking Politics, tonight at 7 on GBH2.
Trusted, local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Ahead on Boston Public Radio, David Gergen has advised 4 presidents. Today, he will advise us about his new book, Hearts Touch with Fire, How Great Leaders Are Made, and how some leaders are simply too old. Then it's free lunch program set to expire in schools nationwide at the end of the month, affecting upwards of 10 million children. Food policy writer Corby Kummer will join us to explain the consequences.
John Rosenthal of Stop Handgun Violence will join us at the Boston Public Library to discuss the latest efforts to enact some gun reform, any gun reform, in Congress. Then it's time for Live Music Fridays here at the library. Local hip-hop artist and community organizer Red Shaydez is here, and you don't want to miss her. All that ahead, Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. U.S. stocks are down sharply this hour. The Nasdaq has fallen more than 3%, the S&P tumbles more than 2.5%, and the Dow is down more than 2%, or 750 points. The steep declines following the Labor Department's grim report showing higher than expected inflation. NPR's Scott Horsley has the latest.
Annual inflation in May was the highest it's been in more than 4 decades. Consumer prices were up 8.6% from a year ago. Prices jumped 1% just between April and May, with the soaring cost of gasoline, groceries, and rent leading the way. Prices are up in nearly every category, including airfares, hotel rooms, and new and used cars. Today's report will only increase pressure on the Federal Reserve to try to rein in price hikes. The Fed has begun aggressively raising interest rates in an effort to curb demand.
NPR's Scott Horsley reporting. The House Select Committee investigating the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol last year is preparing to hold a second public hearing next week. NPR's Claudia Grisales reports dramatic opening statements were delivered last night. The Democratic chair and Republican vice chair presented evidence, including graphic images revealing testimony from former President Trump's inner circle and vivid testimony from people who were at the front lines of the insurrection.
In their first hearing, Chairman Benny Thompson said the attack marked the culmination of an attempted coup directed by former President Trump to overthrow the government.
The violence was no accident. It represented Trump's last stand, most desperate chance to halt the transfer of power.
The second hearing planned for Monday morning will examine Trump's role in pushing false claims of election fraud. It will be followed by hearings looking into Trump's pressure campaign on the Justice Department, former Vice President Mike Pence, and state officials. Claudia Grisales, NPR News, Washington.
The United States is joining with nations across the Western Hemisphere on a new plan to manage migration. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports participants are committing to providing more legal avenues for migrants to come and work in their countries.
President Biden says the United States and Latin American countries will sign on to a new agreement they're calling the Los Angeles Declaration that looks to address high levels of migration across the region.
Each one of our countries have been impacted by unprecedented migration. And I believe it's our shared responsibility to meet this challenge, and I emphasize shared.
While migration is a top issue for the United States, there are questions about how much of a priority it is for other nations. The leaders of the 3 nations that account for much of the migration to the United States, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, skipped the summit over the exclusion of Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. Franco Ordonez, NPR News, Los Angeles.
This is NPR News.
Good afternoon from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston. I'm Henry Santoro. While the U.S. House of Representatives passed a gun reform bill Wednesday that would ban high-capacity magazines and prohibit the sale of assault weapons to anyone under 21, those specific provisions are not expected to make it through the Senate. U.S. Senator Ed Markey says that's because of Republican opposition in his chamber.
My hope is that we can make real progress. And I think that one important step that's under active discussion is red flag laws, which allow for the removal of guns from people who may pose a risk of violence to themselves and to others.
Markey says there is some progress on red flag legislation, something Massachusetts already has, but he says another proposal on background checks is even more problematic. The federal government is close to releasing new rules that the shipping industry might have to comply with to help protect the North Atlantic right whales. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has spent the past few years reviewing the vessel speed rules that it uses to protect the species that number less than 340 and are very vulnerable to collisions with large ships. A NOAA spokesperson says the new rules will be published in the coming weeks, followed by a public comment session. In sports, the Celtics and Warriors play Game 4 of the NBA Finals tonight at the TD Garden. The Celts lead the series 2-1. Tip-off is at 9, and the Celts are the real Warriors here. Red Sox in Seattle tonight for the start of a weekend series with the Mariners. First pitch is at 10:10. 73 degrees in Boston right now.
Support for NPR comes from Caring Transitions, a senior move resource to help families ease the stress of life's transitions, offering relocation, home cleanouts, and the resale of everyday household items. Locations at caringtransitions.com.
I'm Henry Santoro. This is GBH News.
Friday, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. We're streaming on youtube.com/GBH News, even though that encourages people not to come down, so I shouldn't even give that out, but that is the truth. Now, our next guest is always introduced the same way as a former presidential advisor to 4 presidents. Before we say that, we should also say he's a wonderful guy, which actually I hope that matters. I don't know if that matters. Does that matter to you?
Matters to me.
I'm okay, fine. I don't know if it matters to anybody else. But he was a presidential advisor. Yeah, thank you. Apparently. I think, are you married? You are? I was joking. You his wife? Oh, my God. Okay, in any case, made her happy. And she affirmed that. He obviously was an advisor in the administrations of Nixon, Ford, Reagan, and Clinton. He's a senior political analyst for CNN, founding director of the Center for Public Leadership at Harvard, professor at the Kennedy School. His latest book may offer a ray of hope for the future of America, showing how younger generations can and should take up the mantle of leadership, and how older generations, a.k.a. virtually everybody in leadership in Washington, maybe should be heading for the exit door. His book is Hearts Touched with Fire, How Great Leaders Are Made. David, it's great to see you.
Thank you, Jim. It's good to see both you and Marjorie.
Yes, thank you so much for coming in. And we are joined regularly by your daughter, who gives us wonderful information on medicine as
incredible.
Well. Yeah, you've been wonderful to her.
Yeah,
thank
she's
you
great.
So
she's not so bad herself.
She's great. But so before we get to the book and lessons about leadership.
Sure.
The hearings began last night, January 6th hearings. Liz Cheney was taking the mantle, doing most of the presentation. What do you think of the hearings? Do you think it's going to make any difference? Do you think it's going to matter? Do you think Merrick Garland's going to do something? What is the...
Well, I think for starters, every American should be encouraged to watch these hearings, to look at them and weigh them as much as they can, because we are learning new information, but most importantly, it paints a picture of a country that is almost out of control. And it's very discouraging in some ways, but I think it's also should wake us up to what we're facing now and the dangers that our democracy are in. So I think the hearings are serving a purpose. Among other things, what we did not know was that there were so many people around Trump who believed at the very moment all this was happening that the election had not been stolen. Bill Barr notably, but even Ivanka Trump thought it was, quote, BS. That Trump had the election stolen from him. We did not know that Vice President Pence was under as much of a threat as he apparently was. So his team was warned the day before, watch out. But the president himself is quoted as saying, by Liz Cheney here, and we'll see where that all came from, but is quoted as saying, when people were saying Pence has got to die, when the protesters were saying that Trump turned to his people and said, maybe he does deserve to die. Think about that. It's not just a break with your vice president, and you're sitting there saying, maybe he ought to die. You know, I've known the wives of presidents who thought the vice president ought to die.
Yeah.
But not in this case. But the other thing we learned, I must say, is about pardons, that he was the president,
Yes.
after 9/16 was approached about giving pardons to various Republicans. That's unheard of in my experience.
You know, David Gergen, Marjorie and I are both disappointed in the attorney generalship of Merrick Garland, and I've repeatedly quoted some prominent lawyer, and I have to find out who it is because I keep stealing his line. For those of you who, I'm paraphrasing, for those of you who hold out hope that the evidence will lead Merrick Garland to indict Donald Trump, get over it. He couldn't even indict two former Trump advisors who were in contempt of Congress. I am one who believes that the evidence before last night was overwhelming, that crimes had been committed by the former president. What do you think Merrick Garland will do here?
I don't think it's going to move him one way or the other. I think.
Well, what does that mean? That he'll make a decision on his own, or he'll?
Well, he'll make a. No, I think he's going to put it through a rigorous process in which he'll hear from a lot of different people around him. He'll see the stuff. But I think we're being tough on Merrick Garland. You know, he's trying very, very hard not to avoid the appearance that this is just being shoved through. And you're right, the evidence is overwhelming, but Jim, we're still, one of the contrasts with Watergate is that there's no smoking gun still. You know, we had the tape in the Watergate situation, which turned it, and that was it, and it was over. And here, there's an accumulating body of evidence, but it doesn't quite have that knockout blow. And Trump has been remarkably successful at dancing away from impeachments and, other illegal threats to him. So that's why I think I would encourage Americans to watch this, because he may well escape here paying no penalty.
Were you speaking of Richard Nixon and now getting your book, were you there
Yes.
when he walked to, no, I know you were there. Were you there when he walked to the helicopter?
Yes.
What was the feeling that, this is when he resigned and was leaving, what was the feeling in you and your colleagues?
It was extremely somber. We understood that how close we had come to the pillars of the republic crumbling. I had a relationship with Bob Woodward. We've been to the same school together. We're a year apart in college, and we had a sort of an approved back.
When people go to Yale, they don't say they went to Yale. They say we went to college together.
No, they tell you if you went to Harvard, but they don't say they went to Yale.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But in any event, we were so there was also a sense of relief, and I thought it was so interesting with incoming President Ford, how he walked to the helicopter with his wife, and then they turned to walk up, and the weight of the world was suddenly upon Ford, and he reached out for his wife's hand because he wanted that reassurance walking back. He was, and I do think that the coming of Ford was an end to a long national nightmare. And I do think that the institutions of government worked very well in terms of putting restraints on Nixon. There was only so much he could do because there were the guardrails, we had institutions, and there were Republicans, Howard Baker in particular, who told Nixon, you have to go. It was the Republicans who took the lead. We're not seeing anything like that now except for Liz Cheney, and they're trying now to chase her out of the party, and they've got a really good chance of knocking her off. She's like 20 points behind in her primary.
We're talking to David Gergen. The book is Hearts Touched with Fire, How Great Leaders Are Made.
You talk a lot about a lot of great leaders in your book. You talk about how FDR, people know about how Katharine Graham, who ran the Washington Post, who kind of turned things around in her life and became a great leader, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But you started out talking about, young kids, the Greta Thunberg and Parkland kids who are anti-gun crusaders now. So how are great leaders made? Is it different now than it used to be?
It's different in one sense, and that is that the young people today really can make a difference quickly. Greta Thunberg was like 15 years old when she mobilized people around the globe, and she won a Nobel Prize for a 15-year-old. It's like absolutely remarkable. Or look at Malala in Pakistan when she was attacked by the Taliban, and she was coming home from school on a school bus, And the Taliban stopped the bus, got on board, and said, which one is Malala? And eventually they figured it out. And they shot her 3 times, right in the head. And yet she recovered. And she's come here to Boston, by the way, several times for surgery. It's been very quietly done. It's been sort of behind the scenes. But she's a absolutely remarkable woman who has recommitted herself to extending educational capacities to young girls all across the world. And she has a huge following. And she's like 18, 19 years old. Wonderful woman. I've had a chance to sit and talk with her on visits to the Kennedy School. And she and David Hogg, who's now going to school here in Boston at Harvard, with the Parkland kids. And they did such a really fine job, I think, on guns. And you see time after time now that activists are springing up. There was and young activists. It was a young woman, after all, who started the Me Too movement. Yes. It were 3 young black women who started Black Lives Matter. And in my judgment, not only are we seeing more people of color who are stepping up into the arena, which is wonderful, but we're seeing black women become moral navigators for the country. The young black women have become sort of like taking the high ground on who we should be. And it's a really wonderful thing. We should celebrate that. So at the very moment, I think when many of us feel so desolate about what we're seeing today, and we can't seem to stop this cascade of crises that we never solve. We just keep piling them up. And that the Americans are so discouraged. We're in a rough period. It's going to be rough. I think it's going to get a lot rougher in the next few years. The next 6 or 7 years, I think, are going to be very dangerous. Because the person who governs 4 years from now may not be able to, the person who is elected in 2024 may not be able to govern. If the House is now captured in the midterms by the Republicans, it's going to be extremely difficult for Joe Biden to get anything done, anything big done. And then if you look at 2024 and what may come out of that, we're a very split country, and we may have another 4 years of uncertainty and volatility and vulnerability, and people sort of checking out. But I do hope that if you talk about it and you have a chance to meet some of these wonderful young people, they ought to be on your show and come and talk, that there is hope for the future. That you can look out over the horizons past the next 5 or 6 years, and you can see good people coming. And it's time, it's really past time that we begin passing the torch to a new generation. You know, we baby boomers, I consider myself a baby boomer. I'm actually sort of a preemie. But I've been associated with it for a long time, and I take as much blame as baby boomers. The baby boom generation, frankly, as many good people as you can find in the baby boom generation, overall as a generation has been a disappointment. And I think it's time to seek out fresh blood, fresh vision, fresh energy in the younger generations, the millennials, the Generation Z, but also Generation X, which has been passed by. That's the generation who was born between 65 and 1980. And they feel that they've been bypassed in terms of power and asserting power. They need their time at bat. But for the long term, it's the millennials and Generation Z. And we ought to be doing everything we can to prepare them for lives of service and lives of leadership.
You know, David Gergen, when you mention for the long term, I, for one, am not convinced there is a long term. So I'm a little more impatient, maybe, than you are.
Well, no, I'm not patient, but I'm just, maybe I'm weary.
Well, yeah, but you know, David Hogg was with me on television a couple weeks ago, and basically when I said, how are you going to win? This is before Uvalde. He basically said, we're going to outlive you people. And he didn't say it sarcastically, but that's what he said. Your premise, and you said it much more politely here, we're run by octogenarians. President Biden is 79.
Right.
Nancy Pelosi, 80-something.
Right.
Steny Hoyer, I saw on TV yesterday. He's a mere 82, a babe. Trump would be in his late 70s.
Right. And McConnell.
Right. And so while it's great that the Thunbergs and the Hoggs and the Ocasio, all the great young people, Stacey Abrams, the problem is there has to be a hole for them to fill.
That's why the torch has to pass.
I know. So how do we get, by the way, I am so with you on this. I can't, there are no words to describe. Not in talk radio, but in politics.
Yeah.
That's right.
Having said that, in a moment of seriousness, we all agree. A lot of us agree, led by you, this is the right course. What is the evidence that any of these men and women are ever passing the torch until they're 6 feet under?
They're clinging to the curtains now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we get from here to there?
Yeah, I think we have to keep the pressure on. Listen, there's a very strong possibility that in 2024 we're going to have Donald Trump, the nominee of the Republican Party, and Joe Biden running again as president on the Republican and Democratic Party, so that whoever wins will be in their 80s when they exercise power. And it just seems to me that's imprudent. It leaves us vulnerable as a country. Who knows who's going to wake up and have a stroke or have a heart attack? Who knows who might be subject to cancer? Who knows who might be, there are all sorts of things that might happen to that person. It's just inappropriate. People ought to stand back. They ought to have the dignity to stand back and say, it's time for another group.
Let me ask a stupid question, if I may. I don't know these people personally.
Yeah.
I've interviewed Biden as a senator, but I don't know him. I don't know Chuck Grassley at 88 running for re-election.
Right.
Why? What is it that causes somebody who, in many of these cases, had a wonderful career, accomplished much, to never be willing, Dianne Feinstein, to never be willing to give it up?
I wish I knew. I think the change in the culture has been part of it. It is the fact that if you're Dianne Feinstein or anybody else, each one of those people has given in the past. They've done things in the past for which they can take pride. But there is this sense that if they step away from power, their lives will no longer be meaningful. I think your life can become more meaningful as you get older. You can really work with the younger generations, and you can help them along. You can share some of your mistakes and disappointments and that sort of thing. So I think there's. One of the things that Bill Bradley taught me was that his public reputation went up when he stepped out.
Really?
Yeah, that people in New Jersey treated him differently. They saw him with a newfound respect, that he was capable of standing back and saying, it's time for others to do this.
For young people who don't know who Bill Bradley is, maybe the greatest basketball player of his generation.
Didn't play for the Celtics.
Didn't play for the Celtics. Jump. He didn't play for the Knicks. Went on to be a senator and run unsuccessfully for president. We're talking to David Gergen. Can I raise the other thing in your book that Marjorie knows is among my many unsuccessful crusades? You write about the importance of national service. Take a year off, do something. You frustrated me a little, because my belief is the people who voluntarily go into those kinds of things, City Year, AmeriCorps, are people who probably need it less than all the rest of us who didn't do it. Why not mandatory service at 18 years old for every high school graduate in the United States, David Gergen? Thank you, Marjorie, and two people. I appreciate it. Thank you.
It's almost impossible to get that through the conservative.
That's probably true.
Yeah, they just think that's government stepping in, and it's the requirement part of it that I guess.
What do you think of the idea?
Oh, I'm a huge national service supporter. I would do it voluntarily in the beginning to get it started. I think we got to get some money into it. We got to get some idealism into it. We got to get moving. But the idea ought to be for every young person between the ages of 18 and 24 should be encouraged to give a year back to the community in which they live.
Amen.
And if they give a year back, they should then get a year reduction in any kind of debt they built up as a young person. So there's an incentive, and if you give 2 years back, you get 2 years off, and that sort of thing. And what we know is that something similar to this was started in the Roosevelt administration. One of his first acts, Franklin Roosevelt's first acts, came in the spring of 1933. It had just been inaugurated, and he proposed something called the Civilian Conservation Corps, and it's the CCC. And he proposed that in the spring, and by that early summer, there were 250,000 young men in the forests and parks all around the country, refurbishing the parks because they'd gone to hell. You can go into Western Massachusetts, and I walked up in there and found evidence of past CCC buildings. It's wonderful, and it's like 60, 70 years later. It's unbelievable. But people we found this with the military, people who serve early, who put their lives on the line for the country, who do something to sacrifice their own well-being for others, they invariably turn out to be better leaders. Frankly, they're more patriotic Americans, and they come back to lives of service later on. You don't have to do it your whole life, but you ought to do a chunk of your life. You ought to give back, because even in the dire straits we find ourselves, we're so damn lucky to be Americans. This is the best country in the world to live in, unless you miss, until you visit some of the other ones, you don't quite get that point and why it's so important to save this country from where the direction we're heading. We're the hope of the world, and the next generation can save us. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. It's going to be very rough waters. There are going to be times when we completely give up, but you got to keep going. And what historians tell us is that we've had at least four existential crises facing this country over the last 250 years. It was the early days of the Republic. George Washington lost the first 6 out of the first 8 battles. We almost went over the edge and lost this new experiment in life. The Civil War, the Great Depression, World War II, all of those were existential threats. We came through all of them. And we can get through this one if we just get our act together and start acting like grown-ups and protect the future of the country for our kids and our grandkids.
We're talking with David Gergen. The book is Hearts Touched with Fire, How Great Leaders Are Made. Tell us a couple of stories. We had a great one about Ronald Reagan with his Sound of Music, but pick your...
Oh, I love that one, if you want to tell that one.
Yeah, you can tell that one or tell anyone that's your favorite from the book.
Okay, well, I'll tell 2 quick ones.
Okay.
Both in the same era. But Reagan, 1983, I think it was, he was hosted the G8 nations coming in from all over the world. He hosted in Williamsburg. He had a ton of meetings scheduled with the heads of all those different countries, and he had to run the overall meetings and so forth. And so he got a great big thick briefing book. It was about this thick that Jim Baker, our chief of staff, gave him. But Jim was well aware that Reagan read slowly, going back to his days as a in the movies. And memorizing scripts, he would read slowly, and what he read, he would then lock in on. But if you gave him too much to read, he was going to stay up late at night, and the next day he'd be tired, and then you had to really, really worry about Nancy, because Nancy running around with a hatchet was just not something you wanted to face. You didn't know what you're going to keep and what you're going to lose, right? So Reagan gets this great big briefing book, and Baker was very, very cautious about it. He says to him, "Mr. President, we know you've got a very hard day coming up tomorrow, and there's so much here that you really, really have to look at. But please, would you scan it and then get some sleep? It's so important you get some sleep." And he said, "No, Jim, I'll be glad to do that." And off he wandered. Next morning at breakfast, he got about 7:30, and we're all sort of waiting for him. He wanders in, and he looks like he's been hit by a Mack truck. His eyes are blurry. He's sort of hunched over. He's he's not with it. And he sits down, and we're all looking at it and saying, "Oh my God, where's Nancy?" And he gets about 15 minutes into the eggs, and then he looks up and says, "Fellas," and in those days we were still, unfortunately, just fellas. But he said, "Fellas, I've got a confession to make. You did a really good job on the briefing book, and I'm so pleased and so proud that you did it. But did you know The Sound of Music was on last night on TV?" And The Sound of Music, that's my favorite movie.
I love that.
He said, I'm sorry, I didn't get to bed till after 1 o'clock. So we were all, oh wow, we passed it. That bullet went past us. Well, what's he going to be like in these meetings? Because he hasn't read our briefing books. Does he know what to say? And it turned out he was better in those meetings than we'd ever seen him. Why? Because he wasn't so burdened down with these damn briefing books that we, in our arrogance on the staff, had decided he had to read. He just put it aside, and he got up to at a higher level of 30 to 60,000 feet to talk, and he had really good meetings because they were about what the big things are, not the little things in the grass. You got to keep your eye on the big problem. I'll tell you one. Now that was an administration. Well, what story can I tell you? That was an administration that loved pranks. We had a lot of fun with pranks. So there was a tradition that if you were working in the West Wing of the White House and somebody very generously sent you a gift from out of nowhere, you had no idea who this person was, that you couldn't keep it. You had to get it registered and then send it somewhere else, and they disappeared. At any event. And that's a pretty strict rule. So we're loping along. One morning comes a great big painting. It was a huge painting. It was bigger than the size of this desk. And it was a painting of Jim Baker, the chief of staff. And it was sent as a gift to Baker. Now, Baker never saw it. And Mike Deaver and I grabbed the picture because we said, we can have some fun with this. Let's grab that picture. We put it in our closet. So nobody can, he didn't, Reagan had no idea about the pic, and Baker had no idea there was this painting floating around. But we weren't quite sure what to do with it, so the day came when it was Reagan's birthday, and he and Nancy gathered at the diplomatic room getting ready to go out the helicopter, and Baker and Deaver and I came to talk to him. It was, we often did, just before he left, and Deaver had wrapped the painting in birthday paper. It was great big, so we brought it up. And Mike and I turned to Reagan and said, Mr. President, Jim really wanted us to give you this. We just got it. We just had a chance to wrap it up. But he really wanted you to have a chance to see this before you went to Camp David. So here it is, his gift. And the President said, "Go. Do you mind if I open it?" And we said, "No, yes, sir. We'd love to see you open it." So he opens it up, and there's this great big painting of his chief of staff.
That's pretty good. That's pretty.
Baker was just looking daggers at us because he knew we've been up to no good.
So David Gergen, before you go,
Yeah.
David Gergen's book,
Yes,
Heart
sir.
Touched with Fire. Are you optimistic about the future because you think you need to be to encourage people to keep the faith? Or do you really think this democracy survives the next few years?
I really believe that democracy will survive. Whether it will be a good democracy, I'm not so sure. I'm most optimistic because I do believe history shows. Abigail Adams famously wrote a letter to John Quincy, their teenage son, saying in times of adversity actually serve a nation well in one sense. And that is, in times of adversity, what you often see are people stepping forward who become our statesmen. They have a sense of nobility. They're fighting back. They're trying to save something. They're trying to save a great institution. And I think we need to be asking ourselves, it's still possible to become a hero in this world. It's still possible to save things. But where are our Zelenskys? Where are our Zelenskys? Where are our heroes? And how can we bring people forward who will stand up for what's right in the country, like Liz Cheney is doing now? She deserves credit for what she's doing. She's going down in her career, because of this. But she's been strong enough, and I'm just sure her parents are extremely proud of her. But she's been strong enough to stand up for what's right. And we need a generation that's like that World War II generation that was in charge when I first came to Washington. You guys are old enough to remember a lot of that. And the World War II generation, they put the country first. They came home from the war. They stripped down off their military uniforms. They got into civic clothes. And their view was, we went out to save the world, and now we're here to save America. And they worked like crazy in the 1950s and early 60s. Those were golden years in many ways in the United States because they were running things. That's what we need again. We need another generation like that, and we can do it. We are Americans. We ought to take pride in being Americans instead of knocking the hell out of each other, when the moment offers itself. So I am pessimistic about the short term, but the long term I think is much more promising.
Boy, we hope you're right. David Gergen, we loved your book, and it's great to see you.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
all.
much
Thank
for
you
being
both.
with
Yes,
us. We
thank
appreciate
you
it.
Great show.
very
Thank
much.
you.
David Gergen is the presidential advisor to 4 administrations, a senior political analyst for CNN, the founding director of the Center for Public Leadership at Harvard, and a professor at the Kennedy School. And the new book, all about leadership, Hearts Touched with Fire, How Great Leaders Are Made. Thank you very, very much,
Thank you,
David
David.
Gergen. Coming up, Swedes are apparently really mad because word has gotten out that when young guests come to their house in Sweden, they don't get any food. That's next. A lot of other food news with our food man, Corby Kummer. The best places to eat and Pride Month as well. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live, as we do every Tuesday and Friday, at the Boston Public Library.
And Ocean State Job Lot, partnering with customers to help animal welfare organizations.
In the 60s, an underground network of women in Chicago helped others seeking abortions.
I remember looking at the people who performed the surgery, and I felt relief that somebody was going to help me.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly, the story of the Jane Collective, this afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Tools of the Mind, the research and play-based curriculum combines professional development and a comprehensive pre-K and K curriculum designed to build self-regulation skills. Learn more at toolsofthemind.org. And Newbury Court, a full-service residential community in Concord, Massachusetts, for persons 62 or over, committed to creating an active, independent lifestyle. More at newburycourt.org or 978-369-5155.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. But you should get down here. In addition to our next guest, I'll introduce him in a second, John Rosenthal, who has been a crusader for gun safety laws forever, is going to be here in about 20 minutes from Stop Handgun Violence. Red Shaydez, who's sitting in the audience right there, is going to perform for us, and she is spectacular. And we're going to talk to you about the Open Streets program, which is a beautiful thing happening in the city, including right down the street in Copley Square. But first, joining us now is food policy writer Corby Kummer. Corby's the executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, senior editor at The Atlantic, and senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Good afternoon, Corby Kummer.
Good afternoon.
And
Good afternoon, Corby Kummer. Thank you very much for coming in. So let's start with what we've all been reading about, and some people have been going through, this nightmare of not enough baby formula. The New York Times did this incredible story about a mother and father of twins that were born 13 weeks early, desperately running around trying to find formula and not having much luck to feed these prematurely born babies. Who's to blame here?
Well, I would say Abbott did a lot of bad things by ignoring all the warnings that were being, and the FDA, and denying responsibility. It's hard to say who's directly to blame, but it isn't hard to say the desperation parents feel if there's one branded product their doctors have said will keep their child alive. And that's the one thing they have to go from door to door, hospital to hospital, because often hospitals have supplies. But the idea that they're in Anchorage, Alaska, Alaska is not the easiest place to navigate,
That's right.
and it's not the easiest place to get supplies to. And they would go to 4 and 5 supermarkets, look for the right can of the Enfamil formula that was for their neonatal children. And having been in the NICU, it's a very stressful experience. Also, the idea that there have been online breastfeeding groups of mothers pumping and giving their excess milk, which is incredibly moving, an incredible great thing of the internet, but also pediatricians say, well, your baby might get bacteria or HIV, but it's a great thing in theory. So there are all these risks involved.
One of the things that's most troubling to me about this story is my worry that once this gets fixed with a huge amount of pain, hopefully no deaths along the way, and anguish for parents, is we're never going to get to the root of it, which suggests to me that we'll repeat the problem down the line, sort of like the COVID thing, not learning lessons. There was a whistleblower. Everybody denies the FDA. I don't know about the whistleblower. Abbott, I don't know about the whistleblower. Abbott says they were straight about this, trying to fix things as quickly as possible. The FDA also, I don't know. We're doing so. Don't you have a fear as a person who does what you do for a living that this will get papered over once supplies resume to adequate capacity?
Oh, of course.
And we won't fix the damn system.
But think of, I know you think about it all the time, boar feces in lettuce fields. That
Actually,
is something on
we have
your
a segment
mind
coming
lot.
up on boar feces I think on Monday.
Okay. So that caused a nationwide lettuce recall. I don't remember in what year. And so we thought there's going to be a lot closer monitoring. We're not going to allow big industrial farms to self-report and self-monitor, which under successive Republican administrations became allowed and more allowed, much less government oversight because it costs money to field inspectors. So it does get papered over. We don't think about it. In this case, I think it's NBC came out with in February of 21, there was a whistleblower report to
21.
FDA, but it took 1 year in February of 2022 for the actual recall to happen.
Speaking of papered over, I mentioned earlier, but it's so aggravating, I'm going to mention again. We talked briefly yesterday. I can't even remember who we were talking to. Who were we talking about the food lunch program? Who was with us? So we were
Paul Revel.
Paul Revel, a former Secretary of Education in Massachusetts. You know, would the states step up like a number of other states have, like California, Maine, Vermont, I think, to fill the hole the federal government's about to create? Federal government fed an additional 10 million kids because of this national universal lunch program started at the beginning of the pandemic. They're going to let it expire, which obviously is horrible news for these kids. And one of the people who's responsible for it expiring, the Republican leader of the House, Kevin McCarthy, had the gall last night on television or radio or somewhere where I heard it to say, well, instead of hearings, these phony hearings about January 6th, how about hearings about inflation? How about hearings about feeding children while he's leading the crusade to ensure we don't feed children? So the state hopefully will step up. This state and other states will step up. There's no hope that the federal government is going to decide to re-up this program. Is that true?
I don't think there's any hope. It would be in some kind of next spending bill. But cumulative 4.3 billion meals over the past 2 summers. Summer feeding programs are crucial. It's a way of keeping families fed during the summer when they don't have access to school meals. The waivers allowed parents to be fed, schools to deliver meals and have them in congregate facilities, but more often deliver them. So this was huge, 4.3 billion meals. That's all going to go away. And remember lunch shaming, which we talked about a lot before the pandemic. So lunch shaming is by Friday, the woman checking in students has to say, I'm sorry, your mother and father are so behind in paying for the school lunch.
It's heartbreaking.
That you have to have either nothing or go and just get a cold sandwich. Maybe sometimes they would have like a cardboard looking and tasting a piece of cheese on Wonder Bread because you can't qualify. Before the pandemic, up to 75% of districts reported that there was unpaid school lunch debt. So a lot of them didn't want to enforce it. Some of them were over humiliating and shaming it, and they lost their jobs. But it was a terrible problem. It went away. Even under the Trump administration, we have to say, there were lots of school waivers allowing everybody to be fed, no questions asked. Now parents have to go back to filling in and humiliating applications saying, here's what money we make and why we need help from the school lunch. What parent has time to do that, let alone wants the stigma of their kid asking for this kind of assistance?
And there are multitudes. I'm sorry, go
It's also money spent on administration that could be spent on just giving the kids the food.
I mean, if it's universal as a right.
A universal school lunch is an idea whose time has come, and I hope that the upcoming White House conference on hunger, health, and nutrition will float the idea of universal school lunch.
And by the way, that conference is happening in great part thanks to Jim McGovern, a congressperson from Massachusetts who's been advocating for this thing forever. Yes?
Almost entirely.
Almost entirely. You know, speaking of not feeding young children, there's a debate about whether or not if you're in Sweden.
That's right.
And you go to the house of another Swede, let's say for dinner, there's a real debate from what Marjorie and I read as to whether or not your child will get fed. Can you put the lie to this or confirm it?
This is the fascinating social media story of the week, which was Swedes revealing that when they grew up, let's say in the 70s and 80s, before there was a cultural shift to picking up kids and ferrying them every place and kind of living in groups, families lived by themselves, isolated, apart from other families. It was rare that kids would go to each other's houses during mealtimes, but it was certainly expected that they would eat at home. So even though to us it looks like another form of lunch shaming, sorry.
Really?
No food at our house. And one kid revealed that he was up playing with another kid on the 3rd floor, and the mother called down his friend for supper, and the friend said, yeah, you wait here, I'll be back. Just this incredible stuff. But there was another social commentator, this pretty much relied on one Swedish guy, this Washington Post story, who said it was a time when it would look like a different kind of shaming. If a kid came home and said, Mrs. Hendrickson fed me, it would be, the mother would think, oh, so Mrs. Hendrickson thinks I don't know how to feed my child, or I don't have enough money to feed my child. How dare she? I'll tell her something. You know, I won't feed her kid when he comes. So it's cultural shift.
I love the quotes in this story. They had one from a Southerner who said, "The concept of not aggressively feeding a guest in the South is literally unthinkable." And then somebody who grew up in Mexico said, "Mexican person here, my family would illegally go back to Mexico before letting our guests go hungry."
That was such a good line.
I know. So they were talking about different attitudes about how much people should be fed in someone else's home. But maybe the Swedes are all skinny. I don't know. Are they skinny over there?
They're skinny and mean, apparently.
We're talking to our food guy, Corby Kummer. Corby, there is occasionally a story, and coincidentally, more of these come up during your segment than anybody else's, where after I've read the story, I say, who cares? So here's the story, and please, there's a whole story. Where's the New York Times? Some serious publication about how research has suggested that despite what we used to think, and I didn't know we used to think this, that chickens thousands or hundreds of years ago were revered animals
fascinating.
All around the world. Before you answer, who cares? Why does anybody care about whether chickens were revered? Marjorie, I'm talking to you.
Because I think it was a time where people apparently almost practically had pet chickens, and then all of a sudden we decided we were going to slaughter them all and eat them. There was a transition in there somewhere.
And why do you care? Why do you care about that?
I just think it's fascinating.
Okay.
I mean,
how about you, Corby?
So apparently, Jim, you are not on the listserv of the International Livestock Research Institute.
Apparently
or
not.
You would have been keeping up with this story.
What's the story?
Which is that all of us thought that for 8,000 years,
Absolutely.
chickens were domesticated and a part of the diet. It looks more like it's 3,200 years old, and that they went from being, Wilbur the pig to bacon dinner. So
Exactly.
so that's what it was. They were exotic animals. And the mechanism by which they were attracted to domestic areas was interesting, which was dry grain being planted in Southeast Asia. And when that was domesticated, these were seeds that were free food for these formerly wild, beautiful-looking fowl. How many people do you know who have, during the pandemic, bought beautiful chickens?
Lots of them.
And these chickens regulate their lives. I visited a friend recently, and at 6 in the morning, we would get up. I had to meet her at 5, 6 for coffee, and then go and check the chickens to let them out for the day.
Sorry, I
so
missed
they're
that.
wonderful animals that apparently you don't care about.
Now, let me ask you.
How
I'm
about
going
the
to
buried chicken? How about the chicken that was, they
What?
found the buried chicken who was a
Buried?
chicken, obviously
B-U-R-I-E-D?
but
Yeah.
his leg had been broken apparently and fixed.
By
They
a
sent
nurse practitioner.
A nurse practitioner. The kid went to the emergency room. And
The kid?
the
kid?
The kid chicken.
Thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
But the real story is here if we think about the billions of chickens who are raised in huge confinement,
Horrible.
Well, that part I'm with you
inhumane
on.
operations.
Do you eat chicken?
No.
Yes, you do.
And
you
it-
paused too long.
No, it's
obviously.
because I edited a story long ago about chicken factories, and it was so horrifying about the Campylobacter and every kind of bacteria that I'm very careful about.
And they're
chicken.
so stuffed together, sometimes their feet don't reach the ground, right?
Oh, that's turkeys.
Yeah,
that-
that's
whatever.
turkeys.
That's
You
turkeys.
changed my life, though, I must say. I did not know. For years, I've been washing chicken. And now I know
Spreads
that
the germs.
I just
What are you
Pat 'em
supposed to do,
dry.
pat it?
pat it dry.
Pat 'em dry.
Pat it dry. It saves a lot of time, Jim.
Yeah, actually, we don't pat them dry in my house. We revere chickens. And so
You
we
worship
just
them.
have 4 or 5 in our house just running around, crapping all over the place. It's
And a
really-
lot of people do. And by the way, it's actually very bad. You can catch a lot of illnesses from cuddling your chickens too close. That was
Yeah.
one of the great, in Oakland, California, everybody was keeping chickens in their backyard. There were huge child bacteria outbreaks.
Okay, we have this terrible development, which Kara Baskin has outlined in the Boston Globe, which I was certainly shocked by. You think you go out, if you're going to have a cheeseburger, which I suppose lots of people don't do anymore because they're worried about animal cruelty and the vegetarians or whatever these days. Burger and chips instead of burger and fries?
Is Jim not going to ask you, Marjorie, who cares? Apparently, you
No, this one I
really
care about.
about
This
this.
one I do
Okay,
care
so
about.
over
Yeah.
to you two about why this is so crucial.
Well, but I mean, chips. Whoever says this in the
They
story,
go with
I've
tuna fish sandwiches.
Well, right, exactly. And what you do?
Chips
no,
with
so-
tuna.
that's not original.
Yeah,
It's-
actually, you put
it's
it
a Tony
in the
Moss
sandwich,
who
right?
says that.
Moss says
Exactly, in
for
the
cookouts.
sandwich
Inside the
itself.
sandwich is delicious. Yeah, that's the way you do it.
You know what
with
I did the other day?
It is delicious.
Can I
in a
It is
tell you-
sandwich.
delicious.
That's
I'm really
true.
proud. I was off for a couple days earlier this week.
He was.
You know what I did, which I really feel good about, because it's fairly resourceful for me, because I'm usually sit on my couch and just sit on my couch. There was a story in the Globe, and I should know who wrote this. I don't know if it was Kara or I don't know who wrote the story. One of the food writers wrote a story about the 12 best burgers in Greater Boston. And you know what I did? I don't know if I even told you this, Marjorie. Rather than my usual self where I'm saying, boy, I'd like to get one from each. You know what I did on one of my days off?
What'd you do, Jim?
I drove to 4 of the 12 restaurants and bought 4 cheeseburgers that night and sampled them all. How great is that? Like not industrious on my part?
And
what
the
do you think of that
results
out there?
are-
Is that fabulous?
Just
3
like
people are
shows what
applauding.
gets
Thank
you
you
going,
very much.
Jim.
They're
So what are the
jealous is what it
results?
is. You mean what was the best of the 4 I
Of
had the other day?
course.
Actually, the local joint. Why don't you ask me where I went? Okay, I will.
Where'd you go?
They were all 4 good, I should say
Okay.
that. I've never been to any of the 4 of them before for this. I went to the Capitol Burger, which I didn't even know existed on Newbury Street, which is an offshoot
What'd you
of
get,
the Capitol
takeout?
Grill.
Takeout?
Yeah, takeout,
Okay.
yeah. Then I went to something like Crazy Good Cheeseburger or something. It's on Newbury Street as well. Hajoko in the Fenway. And they were all really good, so I want to be clear. The best was the local one in Somerville, R.F. O'Sullivan's, which is a little tiny bar on the Somerville-Cambridge border that was just spectacular. But wasn't that a great move? It's sort of like getting a flight of cheeseburgers was sort of what it was.
Also, that food writing still has an influence. I'm proud of
Well, that
the
actually,
food writers
that's a
and
brilliant
you,
point.
Jim.
Thank you.
Okay, so the crucial question is chips or fries?
Fries.
Fries,
who eats chips with
absolutely.
cheeseburgers?
Okay, but did you have each of the fries, and who excelled?
No, actually, I read Brussels sprouts with one, since you asked. And I had other, like, coleslaw kind of. The fries were terrific from RF O'Sullivan. I didn't get fries from the other. Where are you on this fry versus chip thing? You're asking us. Where are you?
That I'm interested in these house-made chips that one of the chefs said he can have a different flavor every night.
Homemade chips.
And that it's less fat, which seems a little implausible. But that he manages to, first of all, they make a higher profit margin. It's better business for them.
That's a good point,
And
actually.
if you want your standard fries, go to McDonald's and get the fries you grew up with that has a consistent flavor you like. Try somebody else's house-made chips.
Okay, well, that's pretty tough.
Corby, it's a burger and fries.
No,
sorry.
I'm with you, Marjorie.
It's a burger and fries.
I will go with you. The crushed chips and a tuna fish sandwich are maybe the
Well,
highest and best
that's
use
really
of
good. What's your favorite
chips.
kind of chips, by the way?
I suppose Cape Cod, because we're in
Cape
Boston.
Cod.
What else could I say?
But you know, the cheap ones are also really good too. The Lay's.
But do you remember
Tons of
State
salt.
Line, which was the potato chip of my childhood?
No, I
in
don't.
either Wilbraham or
They
Springfield,
don't exist
Mass?
anymore, do they?
But they were great.
Cape Cod chips are good.
They were great because they were local.
By the way, the 12 best burgers in the area, Boston area burgers, was not Cara Baskin.
Deborah?
Was Deborah First.
Deborah First. She's a great food writer.
sure
I love
is.
her stuff. I
Corby,
love both
before
their
you go,
stuff.
it's Pride Month, and somebody, I don't know who wrote this either.
Deborah
talks about, she only lists 7, and there are tons more of places to patronize, which you should be patronizing anyway, but particularly during Pride Month. You want to share a few of them with us?
Yeah, and I think that I was trying to think of the choice of restaurants, and I think it was mostly because their owners are very proudly gay identified and that they'll use this throughout the year.
Yeah, but you know who's not on that list? Arguably the highest profile LGBTQ restaurateur in Boston, Tiffany Faison, who's not there. I mean, that's
Right, maybe it was people who were doing specials during
that may be.
Pride
Okay,
Month.
fine, okay.
But in any case, one of them is a former Irish pub in Dorchester, which is now called, what is it called?
You're
James
doing a good job
Clements.
with this, yes.
I'm doing a great job.
Okay, fine.
It's Rain Drink
Thank God we're
Lab.
not live on the radio, or this would really be
that
horrible.
would be a
yeah.
real problem.
Can I tell you 2 of my favorites since you
Read.
asked? As you know, Canteen in Provincetown is one of my favorite restaurants ever.
Because
Is
it's
it
got a great writer.
Rob Anderson, right?
Rob Anderson.
Wonderful writer. Was his piece in the Atlantic about the
It was
beginning
his
of the
piece
pandemic?
in the Atlantic, and it was sort of a landmark piece about keeping people honest.
The other place I love is Nightshade Noodle Bar in Lynn, which is a little bit of a trek because I don't travel well. It is spectacular. It is just really great.
But what about D-Bar, Fields Corner?
Okay, that's good too.
Which was really important and a leader and a trailblazer. Blend in Dorchester.
Yeah.
That is
Blend-
where we're all going to go. Blend.
Blended Dorchester. Okay, Corby, come
Corby, it's nice to see you.
Thank you very much, Corby Kummer, for coming in, as always. Corby Kummer is Executive Director of the Food and Safety Society program.
He is?
Policy program, rather, at the Aspen Institute. He is Senior Editor at The Atlantic and a Senior Lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. I repeat, Corby, it's a burger and fries. Okay, coming up, we are joined by the long
Have you ever been to any of those 7 restaurants on the list for
No,
Pride
but,
Month?
I don't get out that much like you do, Jim.
It's rather sad.
I'm kind of home.
Who's next?
Okay, we're joined by our longtime, the best in Boston, longtime gun safety advocate, John Rosenthal. He'll weigh in on whether we are actually going to get some reasonable gun restrictions right now, or whether we're ever going to get any reasonable gun restrictions. John Rosenthal is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, as we do every Tuesday and every Friday.
From the GBH Newsroom, a new series, Priced Out, the fight for housing in Massachusetts.
Since 2011, the price of a single-family home skyrocketed. In Brockton, 155%. East Boston, 226%.
The increasing cost of housing and the people struggling to stay in their communities.
When somebody is unstable in their homes, everything is unstable.
On GBH 89.7 and at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And See Plymouth. Plymouth is a New England escape where visitors can see Plymouth Rock, watch for whales, and dine on seafood. From a town brook sunrise to shopping in the Cultural District. More on the See Plymouth app, brought to you by visitma.com. And Sunbug Solar, offering solar and battery storage renewable energy solutions for your home or business. To learn how you can build a more resilient future, you can visit sunbugsolar.com.
Trusted. Local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan, Jim Browdy, live at the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow in D.C., cities around the country, including right here in Boston in the North End, Christopher Columbus Park at 3 o'clock. March for Our Lives is gathering to demand yet again real action on gun safety in America. We're joined now by John Rosenthal, longtime crusader and advocate and founder of Stop Handgun Violence. No better time to talk to you than now. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, John, let me ask you what I said introducing you. You know, every time there's a horrible massacre, and there's just so many now, people will say, particularly when it involves kids in a school, okay, this is it. We're not going to let this go without making some changes. I'm not optimistic, but you know more than I do. Are we going to get anywhere at all this time?
No.
No.
And it's the shameless Republicans.
Yeah.
Who really care more about blood money campaign contributions than they care about the lives of 121 every single day, 200 are shot every day, a mass shooting of 4 more people every day, 1 million people since I built that billboard on the Mass Pike in 1994, and Congress doesn't care, and not enough people care enough to protect their children.
We vote for the people that don't care about gun laws. What do you make of that part? Is it that I often hear that the gun voters are one-issue voters, and that's all they care about. Is that it?
That's part of it. I think they're really misinformed. I mean, truth is stranger than fiction when it comes to gun laws in this country. In 32 states, I mean, there is not a national law in this country that requires a background check for gun buyers in every state. 32 states, no ID, no background check. Toy guns are regulated in this country. It has to have a red dot at the end of the barrel or it can't be sold. Real guns are exempt from federal regulation. And on top of that, the gun industry is uniquely unregulated. Like, I'm in the real estate business. I got to shovel a walker, I can get sued. The gun industry, like Smith & Wesson, who made the AR-15, used at San Bernardino and Parkland and Las Vegas and Aurora, Colorado, or Savage Arms from Springfield as well, who made the weapon used at Columbine. No manufacturing or marketing standards. I mean, there's literally, it is perfectly legal for the gun industry to market a gun like the .22 caliber Herzl used at the Fort Hood military base, where people wear soft body armor. The weapon is capable of penetrating 48 layers of soft body armor. Who wears soft body armor? Police.
Yeah.
You know, John Rosenthal, I have learned a lot from you from the years, and Marjorie and I have read a lot of stuff, and I obviously buy the notion that these Congress people have been bought by the NRA and gun manufacturers. However, there was a congressman by the name of Jacobs from Western New York who represents part of Buffalo, including the Top supermarket, who after the slaughter there several weeks ago said, I'm going to flip, demands action. I know at least part of what he supported, an assault weapon ban, limiting clip capacity, that sort of thing. 7 days after he responded to the demand of at least some of his constituents, he said he was not running for re-election, even though he was overwhelmingly favored in his re-election before he did it. In those 7 days, the gun manufacturers, I assume, didn't convince a population that he shouldn't be their congressman. The population, including people who apparently lived in and around the site of the massacre, decided we don't want a guy who bans the kind of weapons that killed those 10 people, including a security guard who was armed, by the way. How do you explain that kind of reaction?
I don't know the circumstances, but I would say that the minority is much louder than the majority. I'm a gun owner, as you know. I skeet shoot. 90% of Americans support universal background checks for all gun sales. 70% of gun owners support a ban on assault weapons. I mean, for God's sake, when you hunt, you got to get a license.
I know, it's incredible.
And when you hunt deer and duck, you're limited to 5 and 3 rounds, respectively, to protect the duck and deer population.
Incredible.
When you hunt children in elementary school or people in a supermarket, no license, no limit on the number of rounds. So I would say, again, the special interest gun lobby and the uniquely unregulated gun industry who can't be sued, is just louder. And I do believe that the majority of Americans need to prioritize gun safety and the protection of our children and be as passionate about it as the single issue gun lobby is. We need to thank those legislators. We need to thank our bipartisanship here in Massachusetts. I mean, since I built that billboard with Michael Kennedy in 1994, we have regulated guns just like cars. We're an urban state. We have reduced the rate of gun deaths by 40%. We are the model for the nation. And if every state simply regulated guns like cars without banning cars or, anything other than military weapons, 27,000 lives would be saved a year simply if we had the same low gun death rate in every state. So it's time to step up, folks. I mean, there is no end to this. We are unique in the world, and we have more gun deaths and more injuries and gun violence than the 26 industrialized nations combined. Every other country that's had one mass shooting, like Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, they ban weapons of war.
They don't have the Second Amendment. I mean, that is the difference between us and them, isn't it?
No, it's a misrepresentation of the Second Amendment. I mean, Justice Scalia wrote for the majority in the Heller case, the D.C. gun ban case. He said, you can't ban guns in the common use of the founding. And he said, I don't mean assault weapons or semi-automatics. They did not exist. And then he went on to say, like all rights, they're not unlimited. And you can put reasonable restrictions on how guns are sold, which is exactly what Massachusetts has done and proven that it works without banning anything except for military weapons.
We're talking to John Rosenthal, the leader of Stop Handgun Violence.
You know, many people remember that when Emmett Till was murdered in the 50s, a 14-year-old black boy who was killed by these white supremacists, he was beaten, tortured. His mother decided to allow photographs of him to be shown to show the world what is she, I'm paraphrasing, but what they did to my son. And there's been talk since this last shooting. A pediatrician was on television who treated some of these children in the hospital. Well, he didn't get to treat them because they were dead, but he talked about the condition of the bodies, that these children had been decapitated, that they had been, their flesh had been pummeled, really tough stuff to listen to. But because of that, some people are saying that it would matter if a mother or a father were able to do what Emmett Till's mother did and show those pictures. Do you think that would make any difference, or again, is that just, tilting at windmills?
I think it might. I proposed exactly that to the governor of Connecticut after 20 first graders were hit with 3 to 11 rounds, and parents that I know at Sandy Hook had to identify their children by their clothing because they were indistinguishable looking. He wouldn't do it. You have to understand that the AR-15 and the .223 round is a weapon of war. And I was on MS after Sandy Hook with General McChrystal, who described this is a weapon of war. It is designed to cause maximum soft tissue damage. The round is not designed to penetrate. It is designed when it hits flesh to tumble. The entry wound is about an inch in diameter, and the exit wound is 8 to 10. I mean, we are not kidding when you say this is a weapon of war designed for two things: stop an incoming infantry, have a large capacity ammunition magazine so you can fire off as many rounds and kill as many people as possible without having to reload, because people die when they're reloading, and to outgun cops. So we give cops 13 to 17 rounds to protect us, and Congress, the shameless Republicans in Congress, have unlimited number of rounds for Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, international and domestic terrorists that exploit our lax gun laws, where there's no background check in 32 states and 5,000 gun shows like you and I went 2 years ago. Look, if Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah know to come to the U.S. because it's much easier to get guns undetected, believe me, any psychopath would know to go to those states and go to those gun shows and outgun cops. And by the way, Republicans in Congress are perfectly fine with you needing a license to hunt duck and deer and a limit on the number of rounds for duck and deer, but not kids and 120 Americans every day.
We're talking to John Rosenthal, Stop Handgun Violence. Marjorie, for those who are new listeners, you should say, when John Rosenthal took you to that gun show in New Hampshire, briefly tell what your experience was in terms of your ability to purchase a particular piece of weaponry.
Well, remember, John, the guy told me, this is a private gun dealer that told me I could buy a high-capacity magazine. And I said, well, I'm from Massachusetts, and they're illegal. And he just said, well, just make sure you don't get stopped by the state troopers on your way home. But you know what? I was surprised, and you know this better than I do, by all the Nazi paraphernalia. You go to one of these gun shows, and at least for me, not only do you see this weaponry everywhere, but the Nazi swastikas and the helmets, it kind of gives you the creeps. What is that about?
Well, the NRA and the gun lobby, they really don't care about guns. They've created a cultural war, and they've used fear that Democrats are going to take your guns away. I mean, if it was baby carriages that would create a wedge issue, they would promote, more baby carriages. It's simply to create fear And by deregulating and unregulating and unrestricted access to guns, I own a gun. I'll never need another one. It's a high-quality shotgun for sporting clays. I have no interest in killing anything. But I don't need enough. Most guys already have all the guns they want. So how do you build a market? Well, criminals is a great market. But the only way to really legally sell guns to criminals is not have a background check so you don't know they're a criminal. And then the other way to do it is just to flood guns into markets where it's much easier to get a gun than a job, and you have to defend yourself with it. And then when you get those really good high-profile mass shootings, what happens? Gun sales spike. And sickly, they always want the AR-15 that was used to kill babies at Sandy Hook and babies in Texas. And, there's a mass shooting going on today, at least one, and every day. So deregulate guns, increase fear, make law enforcement the enemy of gun rights, more gun violence, more high-profile mass shootings, more gun sales. And sadly, it's incredible. We live in Massachusetts. We live in the safest state in the nation, along with Hawaii. We have the lowest gun death rate in the nation. We've passed 4 gun bills, 3 of which were signed by Republican governors. We've done it on a bipartisan basis. We treat guns like cars. But we also make more assault weapons and firearms than almost any state in the nation. Right out in Springfield, there's 22 gun makers in this state, including assault weapons that are not allowed to be owned or purchased in the Commonwealth. And those weapons are being shipped to Florida, used at Parkland, shipped, around the country to cause mayhem. Think about, if you want to think about, like, are 19 8-year-olds going to make a difference? 441 people shot at a country music concert in Las Vegas, 58 dead in minutes. And Congress, the Republicans in Congress, didn't even notice.
Well, Trump did do the bump stock thing after that, and he did he not?
He proposed it. It didn't get.
Oh, I thought he did by executive.
Massachusetts passed the bump stock.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're turning to John Rosenthal. John, you started by saying nothing is going to happen, and you know much more than we do, and that's what I would suggest. Chris Murphy, who's leading the charge here, senator from Connecticut, says, and it may just be, strategic, we can get 10 Republican votes, which is what you need with 50 Democrats. Your buddy, who you were on TV with me, with David Hogg, everybody knows from Parkland, who's now at Harvard, a couple of months ago, Hogg has tried to lower expectations in his tweets and his comments on television, saying incremental reform is better than no reform. And to me, that sounded like he was setting the stage so that people are not disappointed if the Senate does do something, even though it's nowhere near what a David Hogg or a John Rosenthal or a Joe Biden would want. So I'm more optimistic than you. You think I'm being naive.
No, and I talk to David 3 times a day. Look, after Sandy Hook, couldn't even get 60 votes for a background check just for internet sales, not all private gun sales. So and by the way, the Republicans have said that raising the age for a military weapon is off the table from 18 to 21. Like that, we won't do that. Think about this. Since 1975, more Americans have died from guns in the United States than all U.S. servicemen and women killed in all foreign wars combined. And we allow unrestricted access to military weapons that in all likelihood have probably, between concealed handguns and military weapons, have caused more death than the 2 nuclear bombs that we dropped in Japan on those 2 days, August 6th and 9th of 45. And we have shameless, spineless members of Congress who literally know better but choose campaign contributions over our lives. And so I am not going to settle. And, in all likelihood, just like Emma Gonzalez, who co-founded March for Our Lives with David, I'm going to call BS, because that is what it is.
You know what is really scary to me? I feel very grateful I live in Massachusetts, where we do have, second lowest gun deaths here. But I'm really nervous about the Supreme Court. From what I've read, they're going to make a decision that could end this requirement that you have to have a reason to be out in public with a gun. You just can't say, I want a gun, and take it to the kids' soccer game. But that if the Supreme Court, which is very conservative, rules that you don't need to have that reason, you don't have to go to the police chief or whatever to get approval for your gun license, that we are going to be at soccer games in Massachusetts with people with guns, or we're going to be at the supermarket with people with guns. I know this happens elsewhere, but it doesn't happen here, and it's very disconcerting.
It's very disconcerting, but it's a real false sense of security. Today, 2/3 of all gun crime that happen in Massachusetts will happen with guns purchased in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi. Those are the primary gun source states. We are going to experience what other states are experiencing. There's just no way around it, eventually. And it's going to be easier if that New York decision comes down, and, it's really about licensing. With regard to concealed handguns, there's two types of states. There are states that may issue, like Massachusetts. It's up to the police chief. We have renewable licensing, like automobiles. And even if you pass a background check, but they've been to your house 8 times because of domestic complaints, but no one ever filed any claims, they have to issue the gun in a shall issue state. They don't have to issue the gun in a may issue state. And every single state that has low gun deaths have stronger gun laws than every single state that has lax gun laws. And if it's a race to the bottom, for instance, if the Supreme Court decision happens and the wrong way, we will go to we could become like Texas. There is no minimum age for possessing an assault weapon in Texas. That kid waited till he was 18 to buy it.
The day that he was 18.
But he could have it the day before. He could have it when he's 5 years old. These are weapons we don't even give to trained law enforcement. And the Republicans are giving them to anybody in order to sell more guns, sell more fear, sell more violence. This is the epitome of bad public policy. Combined with, we are on the verge. We were 42,000 votes away from Putin having a puppet in the White House for another 4 years. The Republicans are doubling down. And a big part of the Goebbels Hitler game plan for destroying democracies is to create violence, unrest, intolerance. And we have a president who is espousing violence in order to, create a vacuum for any strong man to come and say, I'll take care of you. This is so preventable. No other country acts like America when it comes to guns, and it's just a way in order to increase fear, death, and instability.
John Rosenthal, we only have 30 seconds. Every time we talk about guns, and I'm sure I haven't looked at the text, we'll get them here. Okay, I live in Massachusetts. Every single elected official is on board. What can I do other than going to the March for Our Lives rally tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the North End? What else do I do?
So first of all, you call Charlie Baker, you call Speaker Mariano, you call President Spilka, and thank them for their bipartisan leadership. Then you go to stophandgunviolence.org. We are the model for the nation. We need help in order to replicate our gun laws so we can save half of the gun deaths a year simply by replicating our laws. And then you need to support the March for Our Lives. Look, these kids have never known one single day of going to school where they haven't been at risk of being shot. They need our support. They've given up on adults because unlike the greatest, generation that fought autocracy and Nazism, we will go down in history as the worst generation who didn't care about our children enough to keep them safe, even in schools. We have got to turn this around. We can turn it around in November if we make gun violence prevention a voting issue and then carry it in to 2024.
StopHandgunViolence.org.
Correct.
John, we're lucky to
Yeah,
have you. It's
thank
great
you.
to see you. Thank you so much as always. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, John Rosenthal. John Rosenthal is a longtime gun control advocate and founder of the group Stop Handgun Violence. When you see that great banner on the Mass Pike, that's John's doing too. He is, he said, with the late Michael Kennedy many years ago. Okay, coming up, we're going to have some live music here at the Boston Public Library. We have got rapper, youth mentor, and community leader Red Shaydez joining us after a quick break. Wait till you hear her if you haven't already. She is amazing. Red Shaydez is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
In the 60s, an underground network of women in Chicago helped others seeking abortions.
I remember looking at the people who performed the surgery, and I felt relief that somebody was going to help me.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly, the story of the Jane Collective, this afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Advocates, the human services provider, is now hiring for a range of positions, including direct care professionals, nurses, and clinicians. Employee benefits and professional development are available. You can apply at advocates.org. And the British International School of Boston, an academic choice for personalized learning for children 18 months to 18 years in a diverse environment. Space is available for the fall. Learn more at bisboston.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Egan, Jim Browdy. We're live at the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. It's time for another edition of Live Music Fridays at the BPL. Joining us now in studio is Red Shaydez. Red Shaydez is a Boston-based rapper, entrepreneur, youth mentor. She's the vice chair of events for the group Women in Music and both a host and a judge, we're going to talk about this, for the Boston Public Library's Teen Music Maker Showdown. And because we're so excited to hear her perform, we're going to jump right in. Red Shaydez performing. We'll talk to her in a minute. I'm Not the Victim.
Listen, look. I'm not the one to play the victim. They gave me freedom of speech, but when I speak, it seems as the world never listens. And not to mention stressing about my ties with gender too. Told me not to speak my mind. Me, I like to bend the rules. Me, I'm often sexualized, afraid to wear the clothing lines. Compliment and show my size. Often bring a load of guys, drooling hard so their eyes, they follow me, they're open wide. First thought that comes to mind is disappear or go and hide. Why? I ask him, is that all I am to you? Every goal I crush is not enough. You think a man would do a better job? Swipe credit cards, flights getting balls. That's all women do, at least to you. We don't get applause for nurturing. Feels of working and they feel our worth to men is non-existent. Hardly honor women, with my skin is sickening. We're so different. Times it makes me feel I'm not enough. Maybe it's my hips, the way they switch and compliment my strut. Maybe it's my confidence, I switch my do from month to month. When I raise my voice, they call it rude. For you, they call it blunt. Hearing right, my appearance might offend preferring whites. They don't care, my life's a struggle. Every day I clear, I wipe the tears I shed. But my mama always says me, told me, go for what I want, but just make sure I don't get angry. A black woman mad is seen as foul, cruel, and crazy. And as a way to tame me, they pay me low and make me act in certain ways we don't identify. Try to rectify like I'm a project that needs to be fixed. Like I'm just some machine with buttons you think you could click. But I'm a whole human being and you see I exist. Maybe they'll recognize me more when I throw up the fist. Recognize me more when I throw up the fist. But I realize I don't need the man or the world's approval. I'll just continue doing me. Well, you know the usual issues will go on, and I'm sure they will offend you. But yes, I'm staying strong, and I pray that it gets better. If I didn't teach y'all nothing, here is one thing to remember. That yes, I am a woman, but I am not my gender. Red Shaydez and Shane Dillon.
That was Red Shades, in Red Shades, I should say, and that name Shane Dillon. Shane Dillon was accompanying her. Red Shades, that was fabulous.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
That
It's
was
so
great.
to see
What
you.
women do. That's right. You know, I'm with you all the
You
way.
with me, you feel me?
I'm absolutely with you all the way. So that was fantastic. So tell us how this happened for you. How you started in your bedroom?
I did. You know what? I always call myself a bedroom rapper. We had like Co-Edit Pro, Adobe, Fruity Loops for people. It's called FL Studio now. And I used to just create in my room every single day, making fake movies and putting my family and friends in all my videos because my dad was a rapper back in the day. And I just emulated him. I wanted to do what he was doing. He was at video shoots, and I was like, I want to do that too. And I actually stuck with it, and here I am.
You know, speaking of your father, Killenfield, right?
Yes, yes.
Tell us a little bit about your dad. I mean, was that the inspiration to get you started in the business,
absolutely. My mom and my dad is the reason why I have like this vast music collection. Growing up, you know, my backgrounds are from, you know, up here in Boston, down south in Georgia, and then the West Indies, particularly Jamaica. So I heard reggae every day, 80s music, 70s music, hip hop, everything.
Do you want to hear a little bit of your father?
Yeah, you know what? Let's do it.
We have it. This is from 1999, the Boston-based rap collective Killenfield with their song Gleam. And the voice you'll hear is Red Shade's father.
Yo, we gleaming tonight, wasteland fur coats, digital phone, solid ropes and G notes. I fold money on the reg like bank tellers, but stay grimy like corner King Street dwellers. And keep heat for my KF live fellas. We city council delegating with heavy metal, poly with tapes and t-shirts throughout the ghetto. So now it ain't hard to put the face with sound. Understand the lingo every time we break it down.
So in 1999, when he was doing that, how many women were doing it in Boston or anywhere else? Not many, right?
Not many that I know of. So I can't say because I was like 6.
No, I got the concept.
So, yeah.
But the reality, it's a fairly new. I mean, we're in a place, Boston, where there are a lot of women hip hop artists. I mean, Upa was at Boston Calling, which I know was huge. 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. That's a shift, no?
Yes, it is. It's a big shift. And actually, when I started becoming recognized in this scene, that's what all the articles were about. Is like this emergence of female or female identifying rappers and artists, because now it's just like a plethora of them.
Yeah.
So everywhere you go, if you like, a certain kind of style of rap, there's tons for you to choose from.
So what is it? How did that happen that all these women came up in Boston?
I think it was divine timing, divine order, honestly, because everybody says, is this something that you planned? I was like, no, I didn't know anybody because I was a bedroom artist. So when I started, no, seriously, so I was like, you know what, maybe I should actually step outside of the bedroom, start meeting people in my community. And when I started doing that around 2017, 2018, I met fellow artists such as Oompa, Brandy Blaze, Cake Swag, and then we started collaborating, and then people loved what they saw and what they heard. So,
speaking of loving what they heard, what are you doing next?
Tomorrow I'm performing at the Boston Common at the Road of Rainbows. So that's going to be about 12 p.m. I've just been on this little run. I've been performing all month long.
Look at the smile. So what are you performing for us next?
I'm going to perform a really song that I hold dear to me called I Like Dreamin'. It actually mentions both my mom and my dad in it, and the story of, starting from zero to where I am today.
So you're going to do that for us now?
Yes.
And by the way, Red Shades is from Red Shades.
Yes, Red Shades for the red glasses.
That's right.
I think I
Put
got
them
that.
on today.
Okay.
Yes.
I love them.
And by the way, if you want to see those Red Shades and you're crazy enough not to be here, which is really inexcusable, go to youtube.com/GBH News, and you can see Red Shades and Shane Dillon. By the way, great to have you here, Shane. It's great to have you performing. Here she is.
All right, but before we get into I Like Dreamin', I just wanted everybody to hear a little bit more about Shane Dillon. And like you heard, I will be performing tomorrow, but Shane Dillon, tell them where you're performing as well.
You got to get to the mic,
Appreciate that. I'm honored to be here with Red Shades. My name's Shane Dillon. I'm a piano player. As you can see, I graduated last month from the New England Conservatory.
Oh, great.
Thank you. And I also did release my debut album last fall, which I was honored to have Red Shades featured on as well.
What's that called?
It's called A Star or a Lonely Dreamer.
Oh, congratulations. Great.
Thank you.
Honored to be here today.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. Shane Dillon, thank you so much. Red Shades, back to you.
All right, everybody, we're going to get into I Like Dreamin'. It's a story. Listen, look, let me bring my listeners up to date. Cause what's a better way than music to escape? I'll take you through a journey, life's full of ups and downs. But right now I'm trying to find some ways to elevate. Find a couple risks to take, a few goals, go achieve them. My back's against the wall almost every season. And nothing is intact, trying to break even. And then I try to stack, but it ain't easy. Look. These are things they said that would happen soon as I grow up. My early moments starting this rapping, nobody showed up. I don't even give a reaction. I said, you know what? It's in my soul. I feel like J. Cole and I'm about to blow up. Don't nobody gotta believe me. Try to be greasy. 2 steps ahead so nobody sees me. I be misleading. Conduct my plays, but you call it dreaming. I really see them short fuse. You give me your reason. Usually breezing on my 1-2. Very selective of who I run to. Cause there are those that try to expose and that there will haunt you. On to positive thinking, ship never sinking, my cup half full, no one is drinking, had to distinguish, it's not another story of a damsel in distress. High standards, lot to handle, and will hand you nothing less than face value. It's simple, what you see is what you get, plus a witty demeanor, cleaner than ones you ever met. Cause I like dreaming. Look, I remember sitting dreaming up on Calumet, thinking, wishing if I'll ever make it. Also how you get dreams to fruition. Thomas Pickett, I better guess it. And these were thoughts of an adult just from an adolescent. Mama checking on me just to make sure I was okay. I was in my zone, I'm all alone, I see it clear as day. Daddy hustling, making sure C don't make the same mistakes. Cause the only thing he wished for me was to be great. Now I take the torch in hand, success is not a question. Of course I can. When I was having doubts, words out my mouth will be, I sorta can. Undergoing changes, my mindset expanded. Didn't think I see it then. In hindsight, I planned it, understanding life is more than strict rules that you abide by. Even if you cherish each moment, still it'll fly by. That's why I stay riding my wave, just like a high tide around. But I chill in the shade, giving the side eye in my mind. Cause I like dreaming. Shane Dillon, take it away.
Red Shaydez,
Wow.
I Like Dreamin', Shane Dillon on the keyboard.
That was fantastic. So I have a question that I always, since I've never asked somebody who does a lot of rap. It's not like singing because you have a little bit more time between the notes. You could have a long note and a short note. How do you remember everything?
Well, I don't, because I rap super fast. I had to pick all the slow songs for you today. It's very different, but I don't know about having more time. But yes, what it is, it's very different. It's kind of like sometimes a spoken word.
Yeah.
And you just, like me personally, I write to the music. Like I can't write a piece and then put it to a song. So that's why this was a great rehearsal and a great challenging moment, because these are the beats from the album, but this is like an instrumentation. So this was the first time where I had to put this verse to an actual instrumentation that I've never heard before. So it's different every time, I say, but shout out to all the singers. Everybody knows I love singers, particularly R&B, so I can't do what they do. I just stick to my little harmonizing.
Yeah.
Hey, Red Shaydez, thanks for slowing it down for me and Marjorie, by the way, so we can pay attention. So this since we're in the library, Teen Music Maker Showdown.
Yes.
I think today, is the deadline for submissions. Why don't you explain what it is, Jim, first, before you talk about deadline? What is this thing that you're essentially overseeing?
Yes, so the Teen Music Maker Showdown 2 is this great music competition statewide for all teens ages 13 to 18 in Massachusetts. And this year we're back bigger, better, louder, everything. So some of the gift card prizes are $100, No, it's $1,000,
$1,000's the top, yeah.
$500,
Yeah.
and $250. And so basically, we're asking all teens across Massachusetts to submit, whether it's vocals, like songs, or just instrumentals, beats, so producers, anything. And we were honored enough to be able to provide them spaces at some of the branches here to create the music. So we have music kits for them, and along with the prizes is free studio time and some headphones from Master and
great.
Dynamics. Yeah. So
How do people get info? I know that I think today is the deadline for submission. How do they get information?
yes, everybody can go to bpl.org/music maker, and
That's
all of
great.
the information is there. Yes.
So youth mentoring, I know, is part of your deal, not just this thing. Give us a sense of what you're doing when you're not performing.
Yeah, so for 5 years, I worked for an organization called the Hip Hop Transformation Program. They're based in Cambridge. It was such like a great experience. So what we did is every summer, we would take a bunch of kids from Cambridge, and they would have 6 to 7 weeks to create an album right there from
great.
scratch. We taught them how to record, how to write. Some people danced. We taught them how to make beats, and they got paid for it. That was their summer job.
Wow.
So it was great.
Wow. So what's next for you?
You know what? Only time will tell. I know it's a bunch of performances right now. I would love to record another album, so I hope that's in the stars and in the works.
You told us you're performing in the Commodore. Is there a place where people can check you out and find out where you're performing?
Absolutely.
What is it?
So on my website, it's chillingintheshade.com. That's no G. So again, that's chillingintheshade.com. And you can go on that site and you can look at visuals and tour dates, and you can track me right there and see all my shows.
So you're doing a third selection
Yes.
for us. What is it?
This one, we're going to end it on a higher note. It's called Catch a Vibe. So
Okay.
everybody in here that's chilling, it's Friday, the weekend's coming. I want you to catch a vibe and have a good time.
But it's
all
going to
right?
be slow for me and Marjorie.
It's
I
gonna
hope.
be slow.
Okay.
It's gonna be
Just
slow.
want to be clear.
If you want to catch my fast lyrics, come to a show. Come tomorrow to the Commons. The first song I'm doing, you have no idea what I'm saying, but you'll rock with it.
Red Shaydez, we're really thrilled you're here.
Thank
She's
you
going
so
to
much.
go
This
over
was
to join
fantastic.
Shane Dillon.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much. And we're going to hear a third performance in a second with Shane Dillon. Shane, you part of this deal? You're part of this one too. Okay, Red Shaydez, can you say one more time, because I didn't write it down, what's the name of Shane's album that people should check out too? What is it, Shane?
A Star or a Lonely Dreamer.
Star or a Lonely Dreamer. Once again, Red Shaydez, accompanied by Shane Dillon.
All right, everybody. So this is our last performance today, and it's called Catch a Vibe. All these songs can be found on Magnetic Aura. My latest album is Feel the Aura. Let's take it away. And this one can have a little crowd participation if you feel so obliged. So in this, we say, East Coast gon' catch a vibe with me. And all y'all have to say is because they live with me. And then this West Coast gon' catch a vibe with me. And I go, why? Because they live. Let's get it. East Coast gon' catch a vibe with me. Why? West Coast gon' catch a vibe with me. Why? Midwest gon' catch a vibe with me. Why?
Because they're live with me.
Okay, and Dirty South gon' catch a vibe with me. One last time, where y'all at? It's a night on the town in the hood with it. Find an outfit and make sure I look good in it. Tell them haters good riddance. Probably mad cause the whole team good looking. Now the music getting louder. Way too hard to hear you. Shawty probably never ready. Taking selfies in the mirror. Bessie cause she text me. Buy up all the liquor. In the other room twerking. She ain't even put her hair up. Why she tell me she ain't even see the message? She don't hurry, then we all gon' miss the free before 11. Bumper, we gon' miss the free before 11. We should all just take a Uber. I ain't even gon' stress it. Women, we ain't never gonna learn. But funny how the pregame is always littered in the turn up. Aux core queen, illest one you ever heard of. Anybody tell you different, we can fix it, that's for certain. But East Coast gon' catch a vibe with me. Why? West Coast gon' catch a vibe with me. Why? Okay, Midwest gon' catch a vibe with me. Why? Okay, your Dirty South gon' catch a vibe with me one last time. Why? Cause they live with me. Okay, so now my crew winners. Yeah, we holding summer. We know what to do with it. Woo! Your shoe game too vicious. 5 of us, but we only pay for 2 tickets. I guess I'm way too smooth with it. We are the party, so we never care who looking. And I'm sorry that you do looking. He can't have me, and I hate to break the news to him. But shout out to the DJ with my song. He from Boston, he ain't worried about the mother Johns. I mean, I ain't trying to rash, I don't mean no harm. I'm just trying to catch a vibe and put my city on. Now, everybody hear the music. You see it from the crowd. Boston say we going stupid, going dumb, getting amp. Whatever words to it, listen to me, take a moment. I show you how to do it, cause East Coast gon' catch a vibe with me. Why? Cause they live with me. I said West Coast gon' catch a vibe with me. Why? Cause they live with me. I said Midwest gon' catch a vibe with me. Why? Cause they live with me. And Dirty South gon' catch a vibe with me. Why? Cause they live with me. I'm Red Shaydez. It's Shane Dillon. The Celtics and Sev. Hey, let's get it. I want to thank everybody for having me. And you can find me everywhere at Red Shaydez 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whoa,
Red Shaydez and
That was
Shane
fantastic.
Dillon.
She's a rapper, an entrepreneur, a youth mentor. She's also the vice chair of events for the group Women in Music and the host of the Boston Public Library's 2nd annual Teen Music Maker Showdown. Thanks also to Shane Dillon, who is fantastic on the keyboard. After a quick break, City of Boston has closed off streets all around Copley Square, transforming this area into a pedestrian-only plaza. And it's not the only part of the city where they're doing this. We're going to open the lines and ask you if you are embracing open streets, particularly on this really nice day of spring. Visiting wherever you can, are you happy to see a city where, as the late, great Tom Menino would say,
there's no longer king in Boston.
After a quick break, we'll be right back. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
This year, Broadway premiered a number of works from Black artists, even as the pandemic continued to disrupt performances.
Now what happens? Are we going back to a mostly white season with mostly kind of traditional works?
On Tony Award weekend, what were the effects of the pandemic on Broadway's racial reckoning? I'm Melissa Harris Perry, and that's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Lexus Broadway in Boston, presenting Wicked, returning to the Citizens Bank Opera House June 8th through July 24th. Ticket information and availability online at lexusbroadwayinboston.com. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady and Marge Regan live at the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. Just around the corner, as Marjorie said, from here at the BPL, the streets, Dartmouth Street in particular, typically packed with traffic are, for now at least, the people's domain closed to cars. There are block parties happening, outdoor dining and food vendors, street yoga, dance lessons, and it'll all culminate in a huge celebration of the late, great Donna Summer. And if you didn't know, June 15th is Donna Summer Day in Boston. The whole thing is being billed as a test run for a possible permanent switch to a pedestrian and bike-only Copley Square. And it isn't just Copley Square. You remember over in Cambridge, we've been keeping cars off portions of Memorial Drive on weekends for a few years. Other parts of Boston, Dot Ave, Grove Hall, Jackson Square, all doing the same thing. And you'll, of course, remember it's going to happen again this year. Newbury Street's closures, thanks to me, by the way. We want to know if you're...
Jim, that's right.
That's exactly right. We want to know if you're embracing open streets, if you've already taken advantage, if you think this will bring back that downtown fun vibe, or... on the other side of the coin, you're frustrated about how these sorts of events make it harder to get around the city. You wet blankets are welcome to call in, too. The number for texting or calling is 877-301-8970. Can I tell you, I haven't been over there yet. I'm going to go after the show. I love the concept. Good for Mayor Wu for doing this. How beautiful will Copley Square be if you can just walk around, have a cup of coffee, have a sandwich. I'm not going to do the yoga. You'll probably do the yoga. Is this not a great idea that is long overdue?
And we owe it all to you, Jim.
Thank you very much.
As we all know, you harassed Marty Walsh, and I think you were
Bill
harassing
Evans.
Bill Evans before that.
In all
and
seriousness, did I not have a part to do with this?
We owe it all
Newbury
to you.
Street? Well, I didn't say all,
Yep.
but some of it.
Okay.
Thank you very
Blue
much.
Hill Avenue, Center Street, Dorchester Ave. Thank you, Jim Browdy.
No, Newbury Street is mine. So are you in favor of this, or are you going to
Yes.
mock me?
I'm usually in favor of it. I think it was such a wonderful thing, when the pandemic, which was horrible, obviously, when you went down to the South End in the summertime in the midst of the pandemic, what did? They closed off whole sections of streets so people could put the dining chairs out in the middle of the street down there by Tremont Street and stuff. People could eat in the street. It was absolutely wonderful. I talked before about going to Vanderbilt Avenue in New York City,
Brooklyn, yeah.
where they shut down this huge boulevard, and they have dancing, and they have food trucks, and they have games, and they have art exhibits and stuff like that. You just walk down the street for hours at a time on a Friday. I think it's open all day long on Saturday and Sunday too. It's fantastic. So I think we're behind the times here in Boston. I think it's absolutely wonderful, particularly Newbury Street, because you can get there so easily on the T.
But the difference with Newbury Street, which I love, it's not going to be permanent. Something like a single street, and will cause people to have to get accustomed to a new kind of traffic flow. Would you not support the permanent closure? This is from St. James, I think, to Boylston we're talking. Yeah, St. James to Boylston on Dartmouth Street. Wouldn't a permanent closure totally change the downtown? I think it's great.
It absolutely would. And like I said, Copley Square has got T stations all over the place.
Right.
The Copley Station, obviously the Orange Street Station, further up to Mass Ave, the Hines Station. But the point is, you could get here on the T. You wouldn't have to drive.
So the number is 877-301-8970. How you feeling about this Open Streets program? Have you participated? Are you going to participate? And how would you feel if it's going to make traffic, car traffic, at least in the short run, a little bit harder if there were permanent closures like Mayor Wu is at least contemplating for this Dartmouth Street thing? I think right now it's only the 7th through the 17th, I could be wrong, of June as a trial kind of run. And by the way, she's going to be here on the 28th with us at the library. We're going to talk to her about it.
To New Orleans?
Yeah.
Because there everybody strolls down the street with their cocktails.
Well, you should be able to drink. We've had that discussion too. But you can't on Newbury when it's closed.
Which is really kind of too bad.
One
you
step
can buy
at a
like
time.
a cocktail at one place and just stroll down the street with it to the next bar, get another cocktail at the next bar. I mean, it could be a really, really fun thing to do. But they're talking about too, not just grown-ups with cocktails. Like I said before, there are going to be games, there are going to be performances. They're talking about this Dorchester Avenue from Freeport Street to Savin Hill to Gallivan Boulevard by Ashmont. That's a 2-mile stretch.
But that's a one day. I love it, but it's a one day or a half day kind of thing.
It is.
This is a pretty radical notion for Boston that seems to be behind the times on anything dramatic in terms of changing the quality of life. And by the way, if you're among those people who don't want to be inconvenienced because you use Dartmouth Street to get to whatever it is, Soldiers Field Road or whatever, give us a buzz. But I think this...
A texter's reminding us, Jim, that it's great until you need to park to pick up your own birthday cake. That would be Jim Browdy, who was complaining about how he couldn't park a couple of weeks ago. So
it was at Flower.
Let's talk about this. A couple of weeks ago, on your birthday, you were beside yourself because you couldn't park close enough to the bakery to get the birthday cake. So, if they shut down the street, Jim,
well, I mean,
you'd have to walk
you want a serious
2
answer
blocks,
or not?
Maybe 3 blocks.
If I knew in advance, I'd just send you. So I mean, that's not. It's not that. By the way, the key to this whole thing is notice. If I knew, and I am a complainer, I'd admit, I'm a complainer.
Yes,
you can't drive where you want to drive. You can't park where you want to park. If I knew that starting next week, Dartmouth Street, this one long block here, is going to be closed forever, you plan your existence around that closure. So I have to say, hypocrite though I may be, I am 100% in favor of this.
I have 2 words for you, Jim.
I don't want to hear them.
Rollerblades.
Thank you. 877, yeah, can you see me? 877-301-8970. Let's start on...
Carolyn from Cambridge.
Hi, Carolyn, Cambridge. What's up?
Hi, it's great to talk to you. I am a huge fan of the closures on Memorial Drive and Copley and Newbury. I hate taking my car. It's impossible to find parking anyways, and so I just love that I can go on the T and ride my bike and just have a great afternoon.
But part of the problem, and I know we discussed this, you had Jim Eloisi, Stacey Thompson on the other day from Livable Streets, part of the problem, did you see, I don't know if you mentioned this with them the other day, I only heard a few minutes of it, and this is for you, Carolyn. Did you see the poll that was done about a week ago where overwhelming numbers of greater Bostonians have no confidence in the T as, I don't know if it was about safety or reliability. I mean, that's really the problem, Carolyn, is for this to all happen. I'm really glad you brought up that point. People have to have confidence in and be willing to take the T, Carolyn, no?
Yeah, I think so. But I think if there's a destination worth them going to, then they'll do it.
Well, you know,
Probably right. Carolyn, thanks for your call.
Also, the thing is, when you ride the T, it's not that bad. I mean, it's not great, but it's not that bad. You know, you can.
Yeah, but you know what the problem I've had
what's
is
the problem?
when I have my rollerblades on, you roll into the subway car. That is, I have trouble stopping, so I usually roll into the other side of the car. That is really.
You're rolling one door right out the other one, Jim.
I'm hoping it's closed. If it's not, then I am. That's the end. Whatever.
This is from Will in Somerville. He says cars should be banned entirely from downtown. I'm Will, who's priced out of Somerville.
So,
sorry about that.
877-301-8097. I'm a vendor at in New England open markets, I don't even know what it is, on Copley Square every Saturday during the spring, summer, and fall. I'm so excited for the Open Streets program in Copley. It'll make a great weekly event even better. Please come shop this week and support an amazing group. 90 plus small businesses. Saturday noon to 6. That's Mick. Mick, if you text back and say what you're vending and what the name of your operation is, we'll try to direct people to you. 877-301-8097.
And there's somebody else talking about Rosenthal Square, which is one single block that was transformed into a pedestrian walkway. I didn't even know it was. I know Rosenthal Square well. But there was a lot of pushback from local businesses about the loss of 10 parking spots. But it's a fantastic space with so much potential. Everyone should come to Rosenthal Square and see the Birch Street Plaza. That's from Steve in Rosenthal.
Well, we should have done some research, but tell me if you are more likely to go spend money on Newbury Street if it's closed and it's that kind of inviting thing, or if it's open and you got to try to find a parking space on Newbury Street. I'll tell you, for me, it's the former.
Yeah.
If it were shut down, I had to figure out how to get here. Maybe it's even the T. It might not be rollerblading. I am. By the way, the only reason I keep mentioning this is because if you don't know Marjorie Egan, there is nothing she enjoys more than ridiculing my physical skills. And rollerblading is, I know this is shocking for you listeners, not one of them.
Listen, I heard over at Inman Square,
funny,
they've seen you in action, and they say,
really not funny.
wow.
Actually, they do say
wow.
But not exactly for the wow.
Casey in Rochester, thank you for calling.
Hey, Casey, what's up?
Hey, thanks for taking me.
Sure.
This is the first time I've ever called into a radio show, and it took me a second to get on. I'm like, what the hell? They're not picking my call, you know? And
no,
it's like, wow,
we are.
You're here.
You're here.
So what are you going to say after this build-up?
Yeah. Well, no. So I'll tell you that going back to your New Orleans thing, they also don't have to wear clothes in New Orleans. So if we can bring that to Boston,
that's my next crusade. Nantucket beaches and then downtown Boston. That's the goal.
Think about it, Jim.
That's a hell of a contribution, Casey. Thank you for your first call. We appreciate
it. Naked on your rollerblades.
No, it's a very appealing for a lot of people. Look at the people walking by. How much would you like to see most of them naked?
Probably not.
I think not is the answer to the question. 877-301-8097. You know, by the way, I hope people know that I think you're serious about this. I'm not just serious about this. I think it changes the whole feel of downtown Boston in a huge way. You ultimately acclimate yourself to the inconvenience. You figure out how to drive around, what the problems are, or maybe you take the T like Carolyn. It will change everything. It's great.
And you know what else they put out at night? A lot of these places when the when the streets are closed. Well, they put them out without the streets being closed. But in the South End, again, where I spent a lot of time last summer, where all the white lights, the Christmas
I
lights.
love that too.
And it just had this really kind of, and the South End is so pretty. It was just absolutely fantastic. Ernesto from Brighton.
By the way, before you do that, somebody watching on YouTube streaming is saying Jim's left shoelace is untied, which
Jim.
it is. Careful, big guy. So, anchorman down, as Marjorie used to say.
Down.
I'm sorry. Ernesto, what's up? Thank you for that.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Excellent. What's going on with you, Ernesto?
Great. Just trying to enjoy the sunny day.
Great.
But I just want to say this. Closing the streets is great, definitely with the nice weather coming up. And especially something nice to do when you have trying to do like low budget plans for the weekend.
That's a great point.
So I feel it's great to do that. The parking is not bad because if you're like longboarding or bringing your bikes or skateboarding or rollerblading, it's not bad. But one question I wanted to ask you guys is there a website that people could go and check out like what streets are going to be closing from what time to what time and what type of events?
Ernesto, you were a genius, and we should have thought of that. And our colleague Jamie is, I'm sure there is. He's looking right now. It may be on the city's dashboard. Do hang up, but don't stop listening. And within a minute or two, we will give a location, a web location to you and everybody else. That's a great question, Ernesto.
They do
Thanks.
call it Copley Connect,
Well,
don't
but
they?
it's not just Copley. He's
But
concerned
I'm
about
not
other
sure.
communities because, as you said, I think there's one in Roxbury coming up, one in, I think,
Yeah,
in
the
JP on Center Street.
The JP is away. They're all a ways away. July 10th is one in Center Street, down at the Soldier Monument by South Street. August is Blue Hill Ave, and September is Dorchester Ave. But we're doing right now in Copley. So
Well, here's the deal. You were right. The site, and this is just for Copley. I don't think it mentions the other prospective closures. Boston.gov/Copley-connect, and we'll try to find out if there's a site that mentions all of the closures. Now, here is a texter who is thoughtful.
Yep.
I would pay money to see Jim on rollerblades and Marjorie riding Secretariat. That is...
Yeah, I think that could be a fundraiser. For next year, we're trying to raise some money, Jim. I think that would be, people could buy
I think it's a little
and
late to
bid.
ride Secretariat. You know what I mean?
Well, Secretariat is unfortunately 6 feet under, but, a different horse. I could ride a different horse. Anyway, 877-301-8970 is the number at which you can call or you can text us. And we're getting two great examples of no-car streets, and this is a great one, Church Street in
Oh,
Burlington.
I've been there, in Burlington.
Yeah, so
I've
have
been on
I.
it.
I used to live there. That was a genius thing they did. You know what they did in Burlington years ago, which is really clever? They built this great big mall underground so everybody wouldn't go out to the suburbs. They built the mall underneath
Main
the
Street
city.
is the main drive that goes to the lake, and Church Street crosses it, right? Yes, perpendicular. It does. It's like a street mall. Yeah, it is.
I used to live there. I think Church Street is the main drag.
No, I think it's Main
It's
Street.
not? Okay,
think it
I
is.
don't
But
know.
in any case,
I
but
don't
it's
know.
beautiful.
And
It's a great
Pearl
deal.
Street in Boulder, Colorado.
don't know
I've never
that
been to
either.
Boulder, Colorado, but anyway. Margaret from New Hampshire. What do you think, Margaret?
Actually, Margaret, this weekend I'm rollerblading in New Hampshire, so I may see you. How are you? Why are you laughing, Margaret?
I would look forward to that vision.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. What's up?
He's a great outfit that he wears, too, the spandex.
Thank
Oh
you.
my goodness.
Thank you.
My
In
heart
all the
falls
right
for it.
places. Thank you.
All the right places. That's right.
Okay, let's move
You
on.
can-
Margaret,
Jim,
what's
you
up?
can wear Spanx
Okay,
underneath
fine.
the
Margaret,
spandex.
let's move on. Thank you.
I am opposed to the idea of shutting down streets.
Why?
I am a cancer survivor. And I have mobility issues. And right now, my friends and relatives can drop me off near a restaurant, near a cafe. I can bluff around and we can have a pleasant experience. But if I have to get out and navigate walking someplace, or they have to figure out how they can help assist me in getting someplace, it's just not going to happen.
Well, Margaret, Margaret, I am sympathetic to your situation, but I'd say two things. One, it isn't like the city's going to be closed down. Obviously, the mayor and her people are going to have to figure alternative routes that people would know. And secondly, it would seem to me, I don't mean to be presumptuous, but wouldn't you prefer a huge expanse in downtown in a city where there are no cars you have to worry about? Like the worst is a bicycle going by. Isn't that a lot safer in your situation, Margaret, or no?
No, it really isn't, because I'm not leaping out of the way of moving vehicles. I'm trying to get closer
I see.
access
Okay.
to
Okay.
restaurants.
Well, you know what we're going to do? Hey, Margaret, you know what we're going to do? Mayor Wu, as I said, is here on June 28th. Either call us or I'm going to make a note. We're going to ask her about that kind of situation, and my guess is we'll get a thoughtful answer. Margaret, thank you for the call.
I'm going to sound like you now when you're sitting and having coffee in the Champs-Elysees. I have a friend
Rue Claire is where you
Rue
have
Claire.
coffee.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, Rue Claire
Thank
is
you.
where you have coffee. But I did go to this Greek island once,
I know you did.
Hydra,
I know.
and there are no cars on
How
Hydra.
great.
There are no
How great.
bicycles. There are no motorcycles. Everybody just walks or they ride a donkey. And let me tell you, it was absolutely great. The whole place is just, and especially if you've had a couple of cocktails, you don't have to worry about things.
But let me
because-
just tell you, you think it's a sight to see me on rollerblades? Wait till you see me on a donkey. That is really, donkeys are saying, get off.
Okay, we are
We're done.
for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for people that came down to the Boston Public Library.
Thank you all for coming.
Hope you had a
We
good
appreciate
time
it.
down here at the library.
Red Shades, you were fabulous. too.
Yes,
I really appreciate it. You were great. Great.
My kids are going to think I'm so cool now.
I don't think so.
Anyway, keep up with us 24/7 way of our podcast. On Monday, we're going to be carrying live the audio from the January 6th hearings. We're anchored by us during breaks or when the thing is all over. We'll be opening the phone lines and the texting to hear from you what you think about them. We want to thank our great crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Mackenzie Farkas, Rebecca Tauber. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Thank goodness John comes up with all the names of these movies so we can't think of them. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. We want to give special thanks to the guys and gals who come down here to help us out. Chris Kelly, Colin Cockrell, and Angelica Marrero. That's it. No,
Well, that's it.
If
you go to my website, jimbrady.com, it will have the sites and the times that I will be rollerblading in a community near you. Just check it out. It's free, by the way. I know you love free. Free.
Not as much as I love seeing you on rollerblades.
Okay, fine. We'll see what happens. Remember that movie I was in where I'm riding one of those, what are those things called?
Oh, Segway.
Segway?
The Segway, yeah.
Taken from behind and below.
Underneath. It was a big
He's
picture.
moving
like a
No, that was not Secretariat. In any case, have a wonderful weekend.
Jim on the Segway.
Okay, we're done, Marjorie.
Moving like a tremendous.
Have a wonderful weekend. I'm Jim Browdy.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Thanks
See
for
you.
tuning
Bye.
in. Bye.